Why are we talking about water at at our climate summit? And of course, this is our Spring Summit 24, and it's really apt that we are talking about water today and the launch of our strategy. So, as we know, Essex is a really water-stressed area, and on average, we consume larger volumes of water per person than most of England. And I'd like to give you an indication of what that means. Currently, in Essex, we use about 155 litres per person per day. And the UK average, especially in England, is actually quite considerably less. It's down to about 144. So that just immediately shows the difference of how much we are using compared to the rest of England. And the future target that you will probably hear later on in the water strategy and talked about today is where we want to get to by multiple uses and various means to drop that consumption to help with our water strategy. We need to get it down to about 110 litres per day per person. But if we could get it less, it would be great. But that is going to be the ambition. And of course, the thing that is really important is that our people, everybody here, all of us, every single one of us, and our economy across the whole of Essex are really dependent and need ready access, sometimes in really huge quantities as well, to clean and plentiful water. And it's something that we only tend to think about when the water doesn't come out the tap, or actually if we put the pump on and then no water comes out. And apart from domestic use, water is needed hugely in those domestic sectors, such as agriculture and horticulture that grows our crops. And it's important in the summertime, of course, when we know there are various conditions, and we've had recent summer droughts, haven't we? And we tend to be getting more excess rain in the winter and longer, drier summers. So we need that for agriculture and horticulture. We also need it for food pressing and then power and leisure. And of course, the water in Essex has also got an immeasurable value, I think, for recreational health and the well-being as well. And that's been becoming more and more evident by the amount of people, because there are people who really love living close to water as well, and the recreation that gives us, and you know all of those points. And with climate change and the population growth that is actually going on, plus the need to restore, protect, and enhance the natural environment, the water shortages we can expect may well get worse if we don't act now. And that's what this water strategy is all about. It's about acting now and what we can do in the future. So on top of this, it's difficult to say, but the Essex water quality is below the national average. So we've got actually quite a lot to do, and I'll give you just an indication of that. In Essex, only 5 out of 91 of our water bodies has achieved the good classification status. And that's quite a surprising statistic, I think, because a lot of us assume that a lot of our local water that we see is actually good quality. And although we know Essex is one of the driest places, as I said, it's a water-stressed area in the county, we've also got a very high flood risk. We've had 9 storms this winter that swept through, huge amounts of rainfall, and we've all seen the flooding and probably experienced it and seen it. And that's where the function of not only the the drainage systems on our highways, but where you see the old natural meadows actually taking that opportunity, taking that overspill, slowing up water and letting it spin. You're going to hear a lot about that later too. So, and obviously we've got seas and our sea coastline, 340 miles of coastline that could be flooded in high tides and high winds. And of course, with the rivers and the amount of rainfall we're getting in those winters. So all of this is about multiple organisations and the responsibilities for water and to commit to improve it. And I think the web of interaction between all of the interested parties is quite complex, and that's part of this strategy, is to enable and help and better communicate and working together going forward. So, and again, you're going to hear that, but it makes sense because water can be a big investment, and we all know about the storm overflows and everything else that we've heard on media as well. So we are going to have various speakers and panelists today where you're going to hear a lot of interesting information from all of the sectors and what the water strategy is going to hope to achieve for Essex, for our residents, and for industry going forward. So it's really important that we work together, because that will then mean that we can have clean and plentiful water for all that we want to do, as I mentioned earlier. So I think before I go on too long, because I will probably, from my team, say you're speaking too long, I want to go on to the first session. So I want to introduce two people now. John Meehan, who's going to look at the challenge of water in Essex, and Dr. Paul Lenister, Chair of Water Resources, to outline the regional response. I think they're going to come up onto the stage in a moment. I just want to give you a quick background on John Meehan, who's going to speak first. John is head of the Climate Adaptation and Mitigation at Essex County Council, and he's worked in Essex and East London for 30 years. Previously as Director of Thames Chase Community Forest, which is well known, I'm sure, by all of you, and the environmental charity Groundwork South East Essex. He's also managed the Thames Gateways Parklands Environmental Programme for Essex, and was the lead on creating Thames Estuary Path in South Essex. John has been instrumental in opening up new green spaces in South Essex, including over 400 hectares of new forest areas and 1,000 hectares of marshland. And I'll give a brief on Paul too, so that would save you a bit of time, John. Paul is Chair of the Water Resources East. He has over 40 years of practical experience in environmental management, policy and regulation, having spent 20 years in the private sector and more than 7 years as Chief Executive of the Environment Agency. And he wears many hats, including Chair of Bedfordshire Local Nature Partnership and the Upper and Bedford Ouse Catchment Partnership. So you've got two very knowledgeable and experienced speakers today speaking on water. And I know John's passion is also about, John's passion through our Essex Forestry Initiative, many of you will know about it, is planting trees. And I'm pleased to say, just very quickly, that we're actually almost at our target, which is fantastic news. So that's good. So, John is going to start with a challenge for Essex. Who's going to speak now for about 10 minutes. Thank you, John.
Great. You've taken most of my introduction away and most of my slides, but don't worry. Excellent. So Peter said I look after forestry, water, floods and green infrastructure at the county currently. So today I'm talking about water, and interestingly, we kind of take water for granted. Peter has kind of already said that, and this quote kind of sums it up really. Every day we use water, we drink water, we wash in water, we flush our toilets with water, and yet actually when for some reason we're thinking about going to other planets, we always work out if there's any water on it. It's absolutely essential for life. And the common view is we wouldn't live longer than 3 days without water. Yet we just take it for granted. And so today is all about saying we can't take it for granted. And we are going through climate change. And as a result, our water patterns are changing radically. So in a high emissions scenario, water is going to be much wetter in winter, something like 30% wetter in winters, and in summers, a whopping 47%. Almost half of our water supply will disappear in hot summers in high emission scenarios. And the pattern of that water is going to be very different. We're going to see much more intensity of rainfall, increasing by 25%. So we've got to think about that, not just about water supply and water quality, but how do we plan for flooding in those scenarios. So water supply and quality are going to be our two panels today. And Essex is an extremely severely water-stressed area. And that means that we've got to think about future growth. Now, you all know that Essex is projected to be a major growth area, but going forward, climate change and our projected growth and also our environmental needs are going to put much more stress on the water that we have now and the water of the future. And across the public water supply, industries are also several hundred megalitres down on what is required going forward. So we've got some major issues about water supply. And in terms of water quality, only 5 out of our 91 water bodies are achieving good status. So that's only 5%. So that is a real problem. Had we been a Ofsted school report, we'd definitely be in special measures. However, England itself is not in a great shape either. Only 16% of England is in good. And when I say water bodies, these are rivers and streams as defined by the Environment Agency. So how does that affect Essex going forward? And how does it affect our plans for development? So many of you will have heard about nutrient neutrality in the summer, when there was a fear that the legislation was going to be lessened in impact. And that is really starting to affect our colleagues in Norfolk, where nutrient neutrality is affecting future development. And there's a small definition there of what nutrient neutrality is. I suspect everyone in this room knows what it is. But it's a demonstration of zero additional nutrient contribution to rivers, estuaries, and wetlands. So effectively, by new developments are being asked not to load up the nutrients of our rivers and streams. We're seeing water shortages in Suffolk, and that's limiting growth in Suffolk. And one of the issues about the built environment is we know from the water strategy and other water strategies that the built environment represents 1/3 of water pollution issues. So that's from runoff, that's from misconnections of foul and water surface water supplies. So we've got to be planning and thinking about water development and make sure that those pollution and quality issues are not part of the future development of Essex. And then finally, just to say that one of the solutions that we're obviously looking at is sustainable drainage systems, and you see some photographs of sustainable drainage systems here, and what is referred to as green infrastructure or natural green infrastructure, where nature areas can absorb water and actually improve the quality of that water and slow it down. So moving on to the environment, we are in a biodiversity crisis as we currently stand. And water shortages are going to increase that problem, not just for freshwater habitats, but also terrestrial habitats. Many of our terrestrial habitats are changing in terms of the amount of water coming to them. So I just wanted to highlight 2 kind of wildlife initiatives that may actually help address that. The Essex Local Nature Partnership, which is 2 years old this year, and we're going to be hearing from Simon Lister, the chair of the LNP, is chairing one of the sessions, and I'm sure he'll talk about it. But the LNP has a couple of targets which will improve nature, but also improve water quality. So natural green infrastructure, i.e. nature areas, one of the targets of the LNP is to increase it from 14% to 30%, effectively doubling areas of nature within Essex. And also farmland, the increasing area of farmland for sustainable land stewardship practices. So these are things like organic farming, low tillage systems, agroforestry, effectively less disturbance of the soil, so locking up organic soil material which holds on to water for longer. So those 2 initiatives hopefully will improve the water retention on the ground. And I know there's lots of local authorities here today, and those local authorities this year are subject to what's called a biodiversity duty to enhance and conserve biodiversity on our own land and to promote and educate businesses and residents in Essex. So hopefully that will also start to improve biodiversity across Essex. So why is this important to water? Well, nature areas absorb water, they intercept water, the transpiration process takes up water, and the soil water is absorbed by trees, marshes, meadows, etc., and then it's returned to the water table in a much cleaner state when it finally percolates through the system. And another initiative that is happening right now is the local nature recovery strategy. And clearly that's focusing on the wetland habitats, the 91 I mentioned earlier, which only 5% are good. So our friend here, the water vole, hopefully will be retained in Essex and actually grow in its numbers. But the LNRS is looking at all habitats, but particularly those water systems, because they're critical, not just because of the water, but they're actually the corridors where wildlife and habitats species can actually move through the whole of Essex, connecting woodlands, marshes and meadows. And then finally, the green and blue infrastructure that we're now looking to help us improve our water systems. So we know that the built environment has a negative effect on water quality, and we need to kind of consider how we're going to change our land use, whether that's in the urban area with proposals like the Canby Rain Garden you see on the slide, or across the agricultural areas where you see hopefully large-scale improvements in water being retained on natural areas and also sustainable land stewardship areas, looking at these new methods. So natural spaces for storing and infiltrating water and treating our water has a whole number of benefits, not just to do with water. Surface water flooding is improved through the creation of nature areas. Obviously, nature and biodiversity is improved, but it's also a way of locking up carbon as we go forward because of the soil carbon and also the kind of biomass of the natural areas. And then, as Peter mentioned, we already know that well-being is hugely enhanced when people are in green environments and natural environments. So just to say that we at the county have a target of improving flood reduction using natural systems, as 75% of all of our future our future proposals are going to be through natural systems. So that just gives a flavour of the challenges, and today you'll hear more from the panels about how do you address those challenges. So I'm now going to say that Paul Lentzer's coming up, but I suppose this is another advert for the Slido presentation. Okay, Paul, you're going to tell us about the regional plan.
Thank you very much, and thank you for inviting me here to speak about the Water Resource East regional plan. It just reminded me, as John was speaking about flood risk, when I was in the Environment Agency and I ever visited somewhere, used to visit Essex, they'd always tell you about the biggest. So if you went to Cornwall, it's the longest county in the country. The thing that stuck in my mind about Essex was that the coastline of Essex is longer than the coastline of the Netherlands. And therefore, when you're thinking about the challenges of flood risk management at a coastal level, you are thinking about those sorts of challenges due to all of the creeks and the rivers that you have here. The other bit that I've just been reminded about due to the amount of rain that we're getting now. I remember in 2012, we had a drought. I don't know if you remember it. I had a letter from the Secretary of State appointing me as the chair of the National Drought Group, and the very same day it started raining. We then had what was reported to be the wettest drought ever. And we had the situation where there were hosepipe restrictions across a lot of the south and the east of the country at the same time as we were paddling through floodwaters. These things will happen, and they'll happen more as we go forward. So an introduction then about what is Water Resources East. And we have a board represents a wide range of organisations with a particular interest in water resources across the east of the country. And you can see the representatives here. And the east of England, for our purposes, stretches from Lincolnshire in the north to Essex in the south, Buckinghamshire in the west to Norfolk and Suffolk in the east, and everything in between, including Bedfordshire, Cambridgeshire, and Northamptonshire as well. And there are board members from the 4 water companies that we have. There are 3 county councils. There's the Combined Authority, the Oxford to Cambridge Pan-Regional Partnership, Association of Drainage Authorities, the NFU, 2 representatives of environment groups, somebody from a master plan developer, urban and civic that is, 1 from an energy company, together with the Water Resources East managing director and technical director. So it's a broad range of organizations, and we have good and challenging discussions there. And I have the privilege of being the independent chair. And we also have with us today Daniel, who is the current managing director, and Robin Price, who was the founding managing director of Water Resources East. And I think they've both done a fine job in getting us to where we are now. So we then have, in addition, 180, around 180 standard members, and a consultation group also that includes representatives from DEFRA, the DEFRA agencies, which are the Environment Agency, Ofwat, Natural England, Forestry Commission, and the Consumer Council for Water. And we've actually got a strategic advisory group meeting next week. So if you want to hear more about the work of WRE, then please join us on that webinar. So then to the plan for the East of England. And you'll see from this that there is a projected shortfall of about 800 million litres of water per day for 2050. Some sort of context, I'm not sure if it is helpful context, but that's 320 Olympic-sized swimming pools per day that you would need to fill up. So it's a considerable amount of water that we're talking about. And 1 million litres is also referred to as a megalitre, which we'll come to, and it weighs 1,000 tonnes. And the weight of water is a factor because to pump it requires a lot of energy. And contrary to some beliefs, England doesn't slope from the north to the south, and therefore you can't just easily move water which is falling in the north and the west of the country to the east. It might help if you could, but it doesn't. But there have been plans for something which was called the 200-foot canal, which was a canal that was going to be built at the level of 200 feet datum, all the way from the north of England to the south of England. There is a patent on it. And I used to get copies of it whenever I was thinking about water. And so that's about close to 40% more water compared with existing usage. Half of that's for growth, and the other half is a reduction in the water that's going to be allowed to be abstracted to protect the rivers. We are over-abstracting rivers, we're over-abstracting chalk streams, and we're also not protecting other wetland features, as John was highlighting. Constraints are already beginning to emerge with agriculture, housing, economic growth. John highlighted Suffolk, commercial development being halted, Cambridge, very close by, 9,000 homes prevented from being developed due to objections about water supply, 300,000 square feet of commercial development being objected to. So those constraints are already in place. And we've developed this regional plan to identify the best value approach to meeting those deficits, with the aims to deliver sufficient water to meet the growth projections within local authority development plans and increase drought resilience by 2040 with a high environmental ambition. So we need 400 megalitres per day of additional water by 2050. So the 800 megalitres per day was additional water plus less water that you're able to abstract. This is the additional water needed, and close to 20% more water is required, mainly for public water supply, agriculture, and also energy production. And these public water supplies were based on the 4 water company draft water resource management plans in the region. It's much more difficult to get estimates of non-household use of water than it is household use, and also to get projected needs of agriculture, commercial and business and industry. And that's a focus that we will have over the coming months and years to have better estimates of this. And there's also going to be a particular focus for us within WRE on the Cambridge Water Security Group, where hopefully the solutions that we come up with there will have much wider application to other areas. The water available for use is also reducing significantly. And all sectors' abstraction impacts are going to be reviewed over the next couple of years. So from left to right on this slide are shorter to longer term challenges. So the first one will be capping abstractions to protect habitats, about 170 million megalitres per day, or a 9% reduction, to increase drought resilience against a 0.2 annual probability event, which is moving from a 0.4% annual probability event. In other words, a 1 in 200-year event to a 1 in 500-year event is 86 megalitres per day, and then a reduction in water is also to do with climate change of about 42 megalitres per day. Restoring healthy river flows is going to take more water, which is around 316 megalitres per day, or 17%. Agriculture, about 60, and other sectors, about 22. So you can see that the reductions to protect river flows is going to be a significant proportion of the additional water that's required. On this slide, you won't be able to read the small print, most probably. If you can, then it's a good advert for your optician. I'll explain. The blue line is the baseline demand without any demand management options. It will creep upwards. The brown line, the next one down, is the forecast demand plan, taking into account demand management options. Those demand management options are, how do you help people reduce the amount of water that they're using in their properties? Redesign of toilets, of showers, of wash-hand basins is going to be key. Then there's demand to deal with leakage control, which is important, and the early surplus becomes a deficit by 2030. So some capping of licenses is going to be required, and then further abstraction reductions is also going to be required. And then we've got the measures to increase drought resilience kicking in. So the following slides, which I'll go through quickly, show the components of that best value plan. Up to 2030, there will be some water treatment works, upgrades happening, some new abstraction schemes, and water reuse from Lowestoft Water Recycling Centre. And then the significant part of that early reduction is going to be on demand management within properties. Then we come to the next period where the Fens Reservoir should come on stream. Additional water recycling centre reuse schemes will be introduced. And then there's going to be a time-limited transfer from Graffham Reservoir, Anglian Water's Graffham Reservoir, to Cambridge Water, which lasts up to about 2040. And then finally, up to 2040, we then get the South Lincolnshire Reservoir coming on stream, a North Suffolk Reservoir coming on stream, and potentially 4 desalination plants being introduced in that period. So in conclusion, demand management and leakage control are critical in the short term. These approaches will be complemented by a portfolio of low-regret supply-side options. And even if the dates when they'll be providing into the water system seem a long way off, planning has to start now and, in fact, has started on these options. Multi-sector investigations need to be carried out to see what the environmental destinations are going to be and who's going to contribute what. Chalk rivers, chalk streams, wetlands, and other sensitive water-dependent habitats will be prioritized for early improvement within this approach. And then we'll monitor progress. And within Water Resources East, we are going to introduce a 6-monthly monitoring of progress against this wide range of measures to ensure that people are on track, and if they're not on track, that remedial action can be taken. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Paul. That's very interesting. I think that was really good at just setting the scene. Not only is Essex water stressed, but I think we can safely say that East Anglia is water stressed, and it shows the importance of water. Okay, so we've now got time for a few questions and answer. So I'm just going to take them off-slide, and it's great to see that this technology is using. The first question is, what are councils doing to protect citizens from excessive increases in bills to pay for the massive underinvestment in infrastructure since the failed privatisation of water and sewage services? Well, that's a really interesting opening question. So over to you.
Well, I mean, obviously councils aren't, this is an issue about water pricing for water companies, and so councils don't particularly have a role in that. So I'm not sure that that's aimed at the right people, frankly. I don't know whether you want to say anything. No?
No, sorry. What can we all do to drive down demand before water scarcity becomes a problem in the summer months? So I think, John, I'll ask you to respond to that one first.
So we all have a role in reducing our water footprint, if you like, and a personal role in water butts, for instance, on your house, the way you kind of use water in the house, etc. I'm not the best person to talk about that, but the other thing you can do is look at your garden, or we as local authorities look at all our land, and if we can absorb as much water as possible on the land, rather than allowing it to flow into streams and rivers and create potential problems downstream, then that's something to do. But, it's a bit like the climate change debate. We all have a responsibility here, and because things are changing right in front of us. I don't know, Paul, if you want to...
Thank you. Yeah, it comes down to responsibility for all of us. Peter highlighted the per capita use figure that you've got of 155 litres per person per day here. That's us doing that. So do we turn off taps when we're not running them, when we're not having them? Do we have shorter showers? Do we not water the gardens during the summer months? Do we not wash our cars as frequently? Do we not fill up paddling pools as frequently? Do we capture the water that we use for other purposes to then use that to water the garden? So there are various things, and it comes down to us, because if we don't want some of these other answers coming in and some other constraints, then we have to think about how we are reducing our water consumption.
Yeah, and a couple of good tips is two things for landscapers that are here and any gardeners. You can actually now start to look at thinking about what you actually plant in your garden to alter the way so that the plants and your garden plants don't need so much water and are not depending on it. In other words, adjust your planting according to the climate. The other thing, of course, is don't use a water hose. The best thing to do is use an old-fashioned water can, because that will actually reduce quite a lot of water. Anyway, thank you for that. I think I know we're running over slightly, but I think we ought to squeeze another question in. Are the environmental agency number on the board of WRE, and should they be? I would have thought absolutely, because of what's involved and we're trying to do.
They're not, because they are the regulators, but they are part of the consultation group that I showed. So there is that consultative group, which has got DEFRA, Ofwat, the Environment Agency, Natural England Forestry Commission, and Consumer Council for water. So they're intimately involved in the work, but they're not on the board because they've got that position of regulator and they need to be able to hold the position of regulator and mark our homework, and you can't mark your own homework.
Okay, next question I've got on here, this is a good one. How do we persuade the general public that house pipe bans are actually a positive water management tool? We should not be afraid to highlight the real pressure we all face or are facing. Yeah, I think that's right. I think, John, you'd probably like something to say about that.
So I missed it. Did it say parklands?
It says...
Hosepipe bans.
Yeah,
Hosepipe bans. Oh, okay.
It's about communication.
Yeah. So people don't like having hosepipe bans, clearly, but what Paul said is actually you have to kind of change your behaviour before you get to that point. And I think it's, the whole differing behaviour change that we need to concentrate on is something that maybe comes out of this conference. And I think there's a whole host of different things before we get to hosepipe bans. When we get there, I think we have to think about the water resources that we have in the kind of household, the idea of recycling our water from drainage, but also recycling our water from inside the house where we can. So, they're not, it's not ideal, but, that's where we often find ourselves. And your point, Peter, about choosing your garden plants, we're lucky enough to have Beth Chatto's garden in the county, and she selected all of her plants based on, drought, stress and tolerance, and that's a kind of model way forward for us all to think about our kind of landscapes, not just domestically, but actually as kind of corporate organisations and councils as well.
Yeah, and thank you, John. And I think also it's the importance of capturing grey water when it's there too at the right time to use at a different time in the future, generating that resilience that we all need to take responsibility for our own water use. Look, we're running a little bit over time, and I want to gain back because I know how important it is that we finish on time because we all lead very busy lives. So thank you very much, John and Paul, for that. That was really interesting. I think you've really set the scene for us, and thank you for answering those questions, and when they don't come. Thank you. So what I'm going to do now there is another panel, and Dr. Simon Lister, Simon Lister, as I'm sure he's known to most of you, is going to head a panel now.
Now, this panel is going to focus on solutions, and we've got some great speakers to get us going on that. But just very quickly before they start, I hope you'll forgive me, Peter, just following on what he said. One of the things I'm so happy about this water strategy that's being launched today for Essex is that the linkage between that and the local nature recovery strategy, which we're working on as a local nature partnership very closely with the council, they're so much saying the same thing. If you want to deal with flooding problems, more nature. If you want to deal with pollution problems, water quality problems, more nature is a key part of it. So the whole effort is very much sort of interlinked. And as John was, where is John? He's gone down there, talking about rivers and water voles. One of the key parts of the local nature recovery strategy, which for those of you who are from district councils, be ready. The first draft of the Essex Local Nature Recovery Strategy is shortly going to be on your desks. It'll be a matter of weeks, we hope, when that's done. And a key element of that is going to be looking at our rivers and buffer zones along our rivers, because from a wildlife point of view, what we need is more nature and it for it to be better connected. And rivers are a fantastic natural corridor. But of course, also, if we can get more nature along our river corridors, then that's going to be great, both in terms of flood control, but also in terms of water quality. So there's so much linkage between the two. Anyway, let's move on to our panels. They've got 5 minutes. They're going to talk about solutions, I hope. I'm just going to introduce them, and then we'll leave as much time as we possibly can for comments and questions at the end. So we're going to hear from them all. Will, who I've known for years. I was a non-executive director of Northumbrian Water for quite a long time, actually. So, and Will is their key person on water resources strategy. He's been living and breathing this stuff for years, and it's great that you're here, Will. Works with other water companies as well as with Northumbrian. And of course, I'm sure many of you know, Essex and Suffolk Water is part of the Northumbrian Water Group. And so he's going to talk first. And then we've got Doug from Anglian. Oh, sorry, Doug's there. I'm getting, of course, we haven't met. Nice to meet you. Who's going to talk about smart metering. And one of the things when I joined the board of Northumbrian Water that really amazed me was that, I may have got the figure slightly wrong, but something like 50% of households in Essex at that time were not metered. And you think, how on earth can we encouraging people to use water wisely if there's no incentive financially? If you're paying a flat rate rather than a meter, you've got no incentive to manage water. Now, fortunately, that's changed. The position's much better now. And smart metering is going to be a key part of the efforts to reduce consumption. And then, Andre, sorry, looking at you for Doug. We've talked a bit about farming. Andre manages Tiptree Farms, the iconic Tiptree jam, Wilkins, and he's doing some incredible stuff in their business, which we'll hear about that. And then Jo from Southend City Council, we'll then hear from her. She's responsible for flood and coastal strategy within Southend, and she's going to talk about their catchment to coast project. And also, I have to say, I saw an incredible video last night that was so impressive that Jo was in, about where they're retrofitting, I think it's a council house in Southend, doing a sort of model retrofit, just showing what can be done. And of course, using water more wisely was a key component of that. And that's a huge challenge for us in Essex because of so many of the old housing stock that we've got. Anyway, so moving on to our panel, 5 minutes. It's all yours, Will.
Brilliant. So we have produced our water resource management plans. The water companies in the region, so that's Anglian, Essex and Suffolk, and Affinity and Cambridge. We're all hoping, certainly from an Essex and Suffolk and Anglian perspective, I know we're, I think, on track for getting our plans published this summer, all things going well, but waiting approval from the Secretary of State on that. The plans are forecasting ahead at least 25 years, but actually we've looked much further ahead with Water Resources East. And very much the regional plan has helped inform the water companies' plans, both in looking at what household and non-household demand is going to be in the future, but importantly, what reductions in abstraction we need to make from existing sources to ensure they're sustainable in the long run with climate change as well. We've got significant growth in the region, and so, for example, in the Essex and Suffolk area, we're forecasting an 8% growth over the next 5 years in houses alone, and there's non-household growth potentially in areas like hydrogen production as well, which need to be accounted for in the plans. And clearly, climate change is having a big impact as we go through the years. I'll just bypass that slide. So I'm just going to talk about our demand management strategies, and this is covering off for Essex and Suffolk and Anglian Water, and there's 3 strands to that. We need to reduce demand in the first instance before we develop new supply schemes, and that's what we call a twin track approach, and absolutely, the right thing to do. 3 strands of that are leakage reduction. So as a region, we already have one of the lowest levels of leakage in the country, and that's reflecting, I guess, because we're a serious water stressed area. So the need has been there for a long time. So we're respectively going to be reducing our leakage by a further 38 and 40%. By 2050 for Anglian Water and Essex and Suffolk Water. Again, we'd love to hear comments about that, and particularly, I'd just like to make the point that when people see leaks, there shouldn't be a presumption that the water company immediately knows about them, and absolutely, as soon as we do, we need to mend them really quickly, but always report a leak would be a key message, and we can share details of how to do that later. Compulsory metering. So we're going to be moving to a compulsory metering strategy going forwards. Currently, for Essex and Suffolk, only 70% of our customers are still metered with a traditional meter, but we're going to be replacing all of those with smart meters, which you'll hear from Doug about. then we'll be compulsory meeting everyone who currently doesn't have a meter by 2030. So it's really important. We think it's the fairest way for people to pay by the amount of water they use. And also comes with that a saving in water because people are more conscious about what water they use. And then water efficiency programs. So we've traditionally done a lot of work in this area in the industry about home audits, retrofitting devices, water efficient showers, all these sorts of things, water butts in the garden. But we're going to be extending that work, importantly, to the non-household sectors of businesses as well. We need to do all these things to meet these national targets which have been set. So in the first instance, we need to meet a PCC target of 122 litres per head per day by 2038, and then reducing it down to 110 by 2050. And then we also need to reduce business demand by 9% by 2038. And that's going to be a real challenge for us, in all honesty. It's not just in the gift for water companies to be able to do this. So we need to work in partnership with regulators through environmental permitting, with local planning authorities through development control to make sure that all new development is actually water efficient from the outset. So it's really would be great to have some more discussion on that point today. So I'm going to leave it there because you've already heard about the new supply schemes from Paul across the region. So I'm going to hand over.
Doug, can you talk to us about smart metering and the work you're doing at Anglian?
Morning all. Doug Spencer, Anglian Water. I know it said Essex and Suffolk earlier on, at which point Robin was like, yeah, we've got rid of him in Essex. We're going, I was born in Billericay 56 years ago, so it's great. I don't visit anywhere near often enough, so it is great to be back. I'm here to talk about smart metering. It will be a canter because the time allotted slightly less than I was originally expecting. But you've already heard Anglian Water Resources Management Plan 2019 identified we run out of water. You've seen the figures. 290 megalitres of that was our deficit. Demand side reduction hangs off smart metering. It delivers on its own with reductions in customer service pipe leakage, plumbing losses within properties, but it helps us target network leakage better as well. For the last 30 years, we have to subtract what's being used from what's going into distribution, and that tells us which area is leaking. We have to estimate what's being used. With smart meters, we know exactly what's being used. We don't waste our time going into areas that are actually not leaking. We target the areas that are. Water efficiency measures. If a customer engages with us and we go in and fit stuff around their house and they change their behaviour, without a smart meter, they have to wait months before they look at a bill and see a change of maybe a few pounds. With smart metering, they get to see there and then, within a day or two, what difference it's made. That deficit got worse in WRMP 24, and those are the megalitre figures for smart meter savings directly, behavioural, customer service pipe leakage, plumbing losses, but also how it then feeds into the leakage savings at 33 megalitres. This has been our AMI journey, started in 2016. My background was in water networks, including water quality, worked with Robin many years ago. Moved across to metering in 2016 to start our trials in Newmarket and Norwich. They were successful. Ofwat supported our request for funding to fit smart meters. And since then, there's been a few things, global pandemic, global microchip shortage, but we're still banging away at it. And we're now sitting at just over 800,000 smart meters fitted in Anglian Water. Our plan is 1.1 million by the end of this financial year. And then we move, end of next financial year, we've not quite hit April yet, and then a further 1.1 million by 2030. This is our rollout programme regionally. The oranges and the reds are being done in this asset management period, so coming towards the end in 2025. The purple patches are what's planned for the next AMP period, 2025 to 2030. Essex is really lucky. You get served by 5 water companies. Everybody wants to provide water to Essex. Those are the programmes that you have in place. Thames only have a tiny, tiny bit of Epping Forest, so they have a few thousand metres in there. They are pretty much complete. They've got some internals to install. Essex and Suffolk have their Dagenham trial, and also rolling out through Romford and Barking, and they have their programme lined up for the rest of this AMP and next AMP to roll smart meters out. Affinity is still developing their programme. They have 400,000 metres planned, but that's across the 3 Affinity regions, what used to be Tendring 100, Folkestone and Three Valleys, now Affinity Central, South and East. And most of those are going into Affinity Central. And then there is our programme where on the right you can see the Anglian part of the region is separated into 5 planning zones, and 3 of those planning zones are now complete. We've replaced all of the old visual read meters with smart meters. We're underway in Braintree and we're just about to start in Halstead, but we will be done by 2025. No plan for compulsory metering yet, so those on rateable value will remain on rateable value, but we're aiming for as close to 100% metered as we can possibly get. Corporately at the moment, Anglian Water has 92% meter penetration with 89% of customers paying on a meter. Getting the delay, or did it not feel me click? How we engage with customers. A few months out, we tell customers we're going, smart meters don't save any water on their own. It's customers with smart meters and us using the data for better operations that saves water. So we have to make sure that we take customers with us on the journey. A few months out, talk to the customer. The week before we're there, let customers know we're coming. When we fit the meter, drop a card in to say the meter has been fitted. And then when the meter hooks up to the network, which most of the time for us is about 2 or 3 days, a final letter pointing customers towards the resources that we've got online. And the engagement we've seen is great. 75 to 80% open rates on the emails that we send. And then anywhere between 25 and 40% customers click through and go to the website, go and sign up to the app and to the portal to access their data. We then send out regular monthly comparisons. We take similar property data from an area and we let customers know you're a high user, you're about average, you're a really good low user, and thank you very much. And the engagement there with those emails still huge. 84% open rate, 53% customers going through to see their data and usually change their behaviour. It also means we can provide a leak notification service to customers. We see every time there's a leak within a property, we can let customers know and they are fixing far, far quicker. And with that, those are the headline figures. There's rather more interesting on the final slide, which is since we started the process, just from measured properties, leakage fixes alone, 5 megalitres per day of the savings that we have to produce have already been delivered.
Hello everyone, I'm Jo Matthews, I'm the Principal Engineer for Southend City Council. We've got a number of integrated water management initiatives across the city at the moment, and Lucy's asked me to speak about Catchment to Coast today. It's going to be a real wriggle through it, real canter, because it's a massive, massive project. But I'll see what I can get covered in 5 minutes. It normally takes an hour to do this presentation, but I like a challenge, so here we go. Hold on to your seats. So, Catchment to Coast. Catchment to Coast is one of the 25 DEFRA-funded projects. As you can see on the screen, £200 million was set aside for the FSIP projects. Now, within FSIP, there are 3 key projects. So you can see there's CTAPs, there's the Adaptive Pathway Project, and then there's FCRIP. Now, Catchment to Coast sits within the FCRIP project, and that is what I'm going to talk about today. So FCRIP is all about, in line with the new National Flood and Coastal Erosion Risk Management Strategy, how we can do things differently. So we're looking at innovative ways that we can manage water and coastal erosion using nature-based solutions at the heart. The key to FCRIP is that it's a data collection project. The reason the data is important is that at the end of the project, we're going to use all the data within the FCRIP projects, there's 25 of them, and that's going to be used to influence future policy and also future funding in the world of flooding and coastal erosion. My little click, wait for it. Hey, excellent, there we go. Right, so Catchment to Coast, as it says on the tin, it is a catchment type initiative project. There's 16 sites within the project. For those of you who are old enough to remember top, middle and bottom, we're basically working in the same vein. So we're looking at whole hydraulic catchments. There's 3 we're looking at primarily for Catchment to Coast, and we're looking at implementing measures in the top hydraulic catchment, in the middle and also in the bottom. Now, the key thing with Catchment to Coast is whilst we're looking at how well these innovative nature-based solutions work in situ, we're also looking at what betterment can we actually get over the whole hydraulic catchment. So if you put all these measures together, what improvement can we get in terms of integrated water management across the catchment? And you'll also notice, as I said, there's 3 catchments. There's one in Thurrock, there's Prittlewell in Southend and Shoebury. They all have sister sites. So what we're doing in one catchment, we're replicating in another hydraulic catchment, so we can have a compare and contrast. So, catchment to coast objectives, I'm not going to run through all of them. The one I'm going to focus on today is basically Objective 2, which is managing the flow high or low, or for those of you in the business, integrated water management. And you'll also see on there, we've got the innovation for the nature-based solutions, raising public awareness, all of these, and also the secondary benefits. So as John was talking about earlier, if you do a water scheme, there's loads of other benefits you can get from that, whether that's societally or whether that's in terms of water quality or biodiversity. Managing the flow high and low, integrated water management, is at the heart of catchment to coast. So there's the common misconception that we have too much water in our area, and that's actually not the case, as you've heard about today. So what we're looking at through catchment to coast is how we can capture water, treat it, store it and reuse it in periods where we don't have enough, so basically in periods of drought. Now this is obviously really important because we're in a water scarce area, and through Catchment Coast we've got a number of initiatives that we're actually implementing at present. As Simon said earlier, we've got the retrofit house in Southend, which was basically reducing the blue footprint of the house, so using lots of innovative technology inside the house and outside the house. We're recycling grey water and we're also recycling rainwater as well. We're also looked at the issue that's normally on the very difficult pile: how can we capture surface water runoff, treat that, store it and reuse it as well, and that's also part of the Catchment to Coast project. So that's kind of at a property level. We're also looking at how we can do exactly the same thing but within the communities. So we've got a number of allotments and a number of community gardens that either didn't have enough water or they had too much. And again, we're doing the same thing. We're capturing that water to reduce the flood risk. We're storing it and we're treating it, and then that water is being reused in periods of water scarcity. So whether that's water in allotment sites or whether that's water in community gardens, or whether even the council parks team, for example, are using that water as well in those green spaces. Another key part is raising awareness, as we've spoken about. Some people, I think, when you look at the stats on the screen, don't actually know that there is a legally binding target under the Environment Act that your water usage will be cut. That's legally binding, that is going to happen. So what we're trying to do for Catchment to Coast is actually bring that to the forefront so people are aware that are not just at risk from flooding, they are going to be at risk of water shortage in the future as well. So we've got a hydro citizenship scheme that we're doing called Water Guardians, powered by the community, and basically it's getting people involved and really understanding why we need to save water and also what the benefits are. You know, if some people are going to the food bank or they're stressed out with other items, we're explaining to people that you can actually save money off your water bills. So there is another positive reason apart from being socially responsible to do that. And I'll leave it there.
Thanks, Jo, very much. And at risk of us losing control, we're doing well on time here, and there's some great questions coming, but do keep those questions coming because we're going to have, I hope, about half an hour to have a good chat about some of these issues. Andre, the role of farming.
Good morning. So I haven't prepared the presentation, but I've been asked to come here and talk about what we have done on the farm in terms of water preservation and water use. So, as it was said this morning, Essex is a water-stressed area, and we believe Tiptree is one of the driest part of the driest county, of course, in the country. And some of the facts, showing that in 2022, rainfall was 550 millimeters, which is comparable to some of the desert countries. But on a different note, 2023 was one of the wettest, and we've seen a rainfall of 930 millimeters. But of course, this is way below the UK average, which sits at 1,290 millimeters. So we are massively, short on rain. Of course, all these weather events will become more unpredictable, has been said, and what we do and what can we do to secure our businesses for the future. So I'm going to take a little bit through a journey, what we've done for the last 25 years. So 25 years ago, Tiptree was producing on bare ground overhead irrigation, and just managing to do some of the crops, not all when they need it. And we were estimating at that stage we were using about 1,000 liters of water per kilogram of fruit. So we could not continue. We needed to do something. And we started investment in drip irrigation back in 2002. And that brought our average much lower. But of course, that was not enough. We needed to go further. And the event which was mentioned again this morning, in 2011, we had the driest winter on record. All our reservoirs were half full. We were wondering what to do. And we actually decided to cut some of the crops right from the beginning, so at least we can guarantee we can see some crop throughout the summer. But in 12th of April, I still remember the date, 12th of April, the heaven opened, and it was the wettest summer on record, so we didn't suffer at all. We actually lost crops to being too wet. And at that stage, 12 years ago exactly, we started actually accelerating our program about water and what we can do, changing our systems in terms of irrigation, greenhouses, and with the latest system which we got in place, if we get a rainfall of 650 millimeters and we store that water and use it for irrigation throughout the summer, we are 100% self-sufficient. But not only rain harvesting from the structure, but also collecting all the runoff from the crops and everything and reusing it and using it again. So it's basically we're running a zero waste of water. Of course, crops are grown in substrate, they're not in the soil, and you actually having a very small media to look after. And at the same time, the water is targeted. It's micro drip irrigation, which we adopted back in 2012, and one of the first in the country, where we're getting to a dripper point of 0.7 liters per hour. So very targeted, and the system, irrigation system, is a live system, what we call it, because you've got sensors in the growing media where you're actually monitoring 24/7, and you're actually acting to the reaction of the crop or to the needs of the crop, applying water and fertilizers. Of course, to do that, quality is really important, and I'm not going to talk about much of quality, but in terms of water, quantity is really good. It's needed, but quality is important too. And in our case, we don't have any underground obstructions. We don't have any rivers close by where we can obstruct. Our license is only for surface water, and we can do that only through the winter period when we've got the highest rainfall. So for that, to secure our water, we need to build reservoirs. The company invested in reservoirs back in 70s, and then, of course, we bumped the investment back in 8 years ago, but we need help. We need help, and there's two things which I would ask really. It's about planning, simplifying the planning for reservoirs and streamlining it, perhaps, and of course grants. Grants are available from the central government, but we need those grants to be more and easily accessible so we can get on that and secure our business for the future. That's for me.
Thank you, Andre, very much. That was very interesting. You've all been very good. If I can just speak quickly to the panel, you've been fantastic and you've kept to time. If there are points that you didn't make and would like to sort of do, when we get to the questions, you answer that, do feel free to bring those points up. But there are some terrific questions, and let's have a go at those now as to how, and remember we're focused on water supply in this panel, and what are the solutions? How are we going to get down from 155 to 110? How are we going to manage water better? And there's a good first question from Roger Morris. Why are planning authorities not insisting on grey water / water recycling systems in all new housing developments? Joe, I'm looking at you because you're with a city council. Do you want to have a go at that?
Okay, so it basically comes down to national policy. So one of the things we are doing through Catchment to Coast and through the EFCRIT projects is we're looking to, as I said at the beginning, get this data to change policy and to change funding in the future. So whilst at the moment there is no need, we're also, through the retrofit house, what I should have said is we're also looking at new builds. So we're working with developers very closely, and we're actually going to be producing at the end of the project a kind of best practice blueprint for putting these measures into the properties. The developers are actually more, open to doing this than we actually give them credit for. Obviously, there's a lot of things they have to do in terms of cycling, active travel, green space, biodiversity, the list goes on and on. But we had a developers' day recently down in Southend, and there was a lot of volunteers to come through and actually help us write this document. So I think there is a want to do it. I think it goes back to the carrot and the stick. At the moment, it's a bit of a carrot. It would be nice to do, but unless the policy changes, then there's no real need to do it.
Andre, you mentioned reservoirs. There's a question from Lindsay saying, can we persuade DEFRA to allow extraction in winter and allow farmers to build reservoirs even if they do not grow vegetables? So I think the thrust of that question is should we be encouraging and enabling more farmers to build their own reservoirs?
I would say yes. We're actually looking to build more to secure our, water for the future, really, because population will grow, and DEFRA strategy for, home-produced produce is increasing, and it's going to increase. So we need definitely more water, more reservoirs, and we need those grants in place because it's a costly exercise and lengthy exercise with planning permission as well. So if that's simplified and we have the grants available, the farmers will do it. As I said earlier, we built reservoirs back in 17s and then invested again in 2016-17, and that was with a grant from DEFRA. But if we do it only by ourselves, that will take hundreds of years probably to get where we need to be.
Okay, thank you very much. And then there's another question that actually builds slightly on the comment from the back, which was, are we in danger of getting to water rationing? And is there going to be some sort of unfairness in the system? And yet we've got a huge challenge. Will, do you want to have a go at that?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So I think one of the key government expectations, if you like, for the regional water resource groups and therefore the water companies was to provide increased resilience of supply for customers. So generally, most water companies provide what they call 1 in 200 drought resilience, i.e. you're not going to have the most extreme drought restrictions more than once every 200 years on average. That's going to be improved. It's going to be improved to once every 500 years on average. So absolutely, the water companies and with the regional groups, we're all planning to reduce demand, yes, but also bring online new supply schemes in order to provide that level of resilience going forwards. And absolutely, that comes at a cost. And as part of the development of the plans, the water companies have had what they call called customer challenge groups, and a vocal voice on that, as you expect, would be the Consumer Council for Water, ensuring that the water companies provide protection to particularly vulnerable customers, but also those on lower incomes. So already water companies offer support to families that are struggling to pay bills that are low, have a lower income, through things like flexible payment plans, even caps on water bills, those sorts of things. So anyone that might be struggling, absolutely, they need to speak to their water company in the first place. But there is support there, both now and even more support going forwards as we need to develop these more expensive schemes as well.
Yeah, it's thank you, Will. I mean, it is an interesting point there, getting the balance between affordability and doing what we have to do. And there's another sort of question here that slightly leads to that, because also somebody asked about, I think it was a question, I think, to the other panel, about the it's a pity that Ofwat, the regulator, is not in the room, because there is a real issue that for years, and the water companies, and now I'm going to sound corporate, sorry, and I'm actually independent, I have nothing to do with any company whatsoever, just to comfort the guy at the back, but it's going to sound defensive, because water bills are actually relatively low compared to other utility bills. And for years, the regulator, arguably rightly, has been pushing bills down, making sure water companies do not raise bills. And they've been trying to invest in some of these issues for years. And of course, you get the headlines of oh yeah, it's shareholders, foreign shareholders, they're creaming off all the money. It makes a good headline. But the reality is that a lot of the water companies have been trying to invest more in this for years and have been not able to because of the regulator wanting to keep bills down. And so there's a genuine balance there to be met between affordability and meeting some of these challenges. And this question here slightly sort of leads on that. This is actually anonymous, so this is where it gets more interesting. There are lots of overlapping plans and governance structures with different responsibilities. Do you think we have the right structures in place to manage the whole water system sustainably? Anybody want to have a go at that?
Yeah, I'll start off. I think this is where the regional groups come in. So some time ago, there was a group set up called the National Framework for Water Resources, and it's looked at a national level, kind of what demand's going to be in the future, what do we need to do to protect the environment, and has set out a whole series of must, shoulds and coulds that the regional groups, which Water Resource East is one of those, need to deliver in the plan. In their regional plan. And then the idea was that that regional plan kind of informs the water companies' plans as well, and that we all work together, not in silos. In the past, maybe water companies have developed new resource schemes in their own patch rather than considering doing something jointly maybe with another water company. Not always, because we've got lots of good examples of where that's not the case. But absolutely, the regional groups have been really great in bringing all stakeholders together, as Paul was explaining earlier on, to come up with a joined-up plan to hopefully to come up with new resource schemes, demand management schemes that are the most efficient and the best value for our customers as well. So I'm sure there's lots of additional improvements that we can make to that process for the next round of regional plans from 2025 to 2030, but absolutely a big step forward compared to where we were, say, 5 or more years ago.
So just thinking back to Catchment to Coast, we've actually got 16 partners within that project. Now, one of the criteria to get the funding for FGRIP was that all the ideas and innovation needed to be strategically aligned with local and national and regional policies. I think one of the key things really is that there's lots of different plans, there's lots of people doing lots of things, but actually you'll see that there's lots of overlap, and I think that's one thing I've really seen through Catchment to Coast is that there's lots of different objectives, and by working together we can deliver so much more, not just in terms of cost benefit, but also in terms of those kind of secondary measures, all those additional benefits for water quality, for biodiversity, for habitats. So yeah, it is a bit confusing and there are a lot of plans, but as Will said, we've got that regional structure which we can align to.
Thank you. And another couple of questions which I'm going to read out because they're linked. From Archie Ruggles-Bryce, is the true value of water understood by everyone that uses it? If not, how do we change that? And then for Doug, can customers outside trial areas proactively request a smart meter? And is there any push for them to do so? And do we tell customers what the PCC targets are? I think that's a good question, because I bet if you did a survey of the people of Essex and say, do you know that the per capita consumption is now 155 litres of water a day, whatever it is, and there's a legal duty to get that down to 110, not many would have a clue about that. So what do we do to publicise that? Anyway, so question for you, why don't you start off, Doug, about the question of can customers outside trial areas proactively request a smart meter, and is there any push for them to do so?
Well, I mean, first I suppose I need to make clear, it's not a trial. We're getting half the company done, 1.1 million customers done by end of financial year 2024-5, and then another 1.1 million. At the moment, the smart meters that we use run on a private radio network, so we have to put network coverage up in order for a meter to connect and to get the data hauled back. Oddly enough, I'm away from a set of procurement meetings that are running all week this week today to be here, because this is much more fun, where we're looking to procure the next 1.1 million meters. Now, that system could run on a public network. A lot of councils and a lot of other industries are driving public networks, and that would open up a fit anything anywhere. What we have done for the last 5 years, even if a property isn't in an area where the rollout is imminent, so if in year 1 we had a property sitting outside network coverage, but we knew we would be there in 2 or 3 years, then if it was a new connection, a meter exchange, a meter options request, then yes, we would fit a smart meter, and once network arrived, we would then provide smart meter data once the meter hooked up. But at the moment, until we get network comms, we can't provide smart meter data. In terms of letting customers know, you're absolutely right, there is a gap in perception. One of the many slides that I didn't use today, public perception is on average that everybody thinks they use about 100 litres per day in an average household, 2.4 children. In Anglian, average consumption is sitting at around 130. So yes, Essex is at the high end of it. And it does come as a surprise. These aren't figures that we post on the front of our website, but they are figures that go to all of our smart metering customers. In that, we need to look at comparisons with the local neighbourhoods. Larger properties, properties with gardens, properties with lots of cars on the driveway use more water than flats with no gardens. And lower needs in terms of water use. So it's interventions at the relevant point for customers. There's no point sending letters to a customer in a flat and saying, can you stop using your hose pipe? But somebody who wants to keep their bowling green lawn and all of the borders healthy in their garden, that's where we need to start talking about water butts, and that's where the smart meters will make a difference.
Before you come in, Will, there's a sort of slightly related question which we haven't really touched on, which is about incentives. And it's from Tom saying, in relation really to the same thing, a key success factor in improved water management is public behaviour change. We can achieve this through top-down measures such as setting limits. But to get full buy-in, how can we better engage with and incentivise people to bring them along with the needed changes? And I wonder if the water industry is thinking about incentives that they can give to customers.
Yeah, I'll just start off, maybe hand over to Doug again on that. But look, we're doing lots of things as an industry in terms of supporting customers to reduce their demand. You know, ultimately, particularly if you're on a meter, you're paying for what water you use. You want to keep your bill as low as possible. And therefore, that's how we're supporting customers to save money, is by reducing their water use. So again, all of the water efficiency programs that we've got between our companies, home water audits, helping support with fixing leaky loos, which I think are a massive problem, actually, and it'd be good to talk about those today. Providing low pressure shower heads, those sorts of things, nozzles for hose pipe, what do you call the triggers for hose pipes in the garden, just so people can help reduce their own water use. So we're doing lots of things in those areas. I just think also education's a really...
I'm now going to be a today program, but are you giving them incentives to do so? Can you talk about financial incentives?
I can't personally, Simon, I'm afraid. I don't know if anyone else wants to comment on that.
Yeah, so it's quite an interesting thing we found with our co-creation, and especially with Juniper House. As I say, people don't realise, how much water they use. And so the one thing I learnt from Juniper House is there is so many grants out there available for people to put solar panels on their roof to insulate their loft, to have cavity wall insulation. Unless you're very lucky and got a very nice water company who'll give you a water butt, There's nothing out there to help residents or businesses make their homes water resilient. So yes, as Tom said, behaviour is a key part, but there's that chicken and egg scenario. People need to be able to get the stuff to make their house more resilient so they can change some of their behaviours as well. So we've got a hydro loop in Juniper House, and that takes all the water from the washing machine, from sinks and baths, cleans it, and then it goes back around the house so you can use it to flush your use and also use it to, again, use back in your washing machine. We're taking water from the roof that's going into the blue-green hydro rock system, which is a flood protection and an irrigation system. So it's doing two things, but again, it's free water. That's what we're saying to people. If water bills do go up and you are restricted, there are so many ways you can capture and reuse water on your own property, and that's free. You don't have to pay the water company anything for that.
Certainly, yeah. I mean, as Will mentioned, all the water companies have their water efficiency measures, and their visits at Anglian, it's dropped 20. But smart metering really does unlock what I think we're all dancing around here, which is gamification, which is very much my colleagues in our water efficiency team keen as mustard for the smart metering data to open that up. The first and simplest incentive is whether a property is losing water through a plumbing loss, through a leak in that property, that will be costing a customer money on their bill. Smart metering helps flag that quicker and means that customers will not end up paying that bill for that water that's lost. It means if they change behaviour, if they look at, I mean, I don't think there's many people that still run the tap while they clean their teeth, but if they look at a behavioural change step like that, if they look at the hose pipe, the pressure washer and a bucket, the next time they're going to wash the car and think about how much water each one of those three approaches will take, they will see the reduction in their bill, and they can do that via the online portal. So there is a fundamental, financial edge there. But there's been some very interesting work done over the years. I mean, certainly Tim Wagstaff from Essex and Suffolk has been an absolute leader in looking at gamification around water supply. And again, it's getting the message right for the right people. To a lot of customers, the cost of water is so low that actually the incentive of saving 5, 10, 15, 20 pounds off a water bill of 400, 450 pounds isn't that much of an incentive to change their behaviour. For other customers, I mean, as the question from the floor made, for other customers, we've had contacts with Anglian Water, customers with smart meters, where we've saved them just £20 off their annual bill, and it's been the difference between being able to afford something else and not being able to afford something else. So yes, there's financial reward there. What's tended to be found is that in areas where customers don't struggle to pay their bill, gamification comes far more around community. There's been some really interesting work around water companies coming in to do work in the community, improving playgrounds and stuff like that by having villages compete against one another for the greatest savings. One of the problems that we have with gamification at the moment is it's very difficult in terms of data protection, taking customers' data to look at how much an individual has saved and put that into a league that then results in a reward has to be very carefully planned from a data protection perspective. And the companies that produce, I mean, gamification is a very complicated process. It tends to be delivered by third-party companies, which makes it even harder. A final part for us is half our company is done, half our company is not done. How fair is it that half our customers get gamification to reduce their consumption and half don't? So yes, we are working at it, but it's a wee way off yet.
Tom Harris, increased rain intensity and more concentrated periods of rainfall means water attenuation is going to be crucial. Farmland has huge potential to deliver this alongside a multitude of wider benefits for biodiversity. However, the revenue model needs to be clear. Who will pay? So who should pay for all this? Is it going to be you, Wilkins Jam?
That's a hard question, really. And I think the end user probably have to pay, but also it has to be a balanced approach. What do we want? We get this rain, not only the rain and the floods and everything, but we're getting our soils washed as well down the sea. So we have to do something. We have to do work, and we have to perhaps have a shared responsibility between farmers and end users, really.
Water meadows, floodplain and lesser-known wet woodlands in Chelmsford provide vital habitat highly sensitive to climate change. Water is more than a human, agriculture and industrial asset. can we be reassured that all strategies and policies extend to restoration, preservation of these? So, can we make sure that nature's going to be okay too? I'm going to go on just bearing in mind John Hall's point, read out another question, and then perhaps we can sort of think about that too. And this is quite a radical one. How can it make sense to pursue economic growth in a region with inadequate water available? Why not deliver the growth elsewhere and concentrate on sustaining existing homes, farms, businesses in Essex while improving river flows?
I just wanted to pick up on the last comment. So as part of the FCRIT programme, one thing we're looking at is how funding and policy is going to change in the future. So that's in relation to flood risk management and coastal erosion. At the moment, if you can get, the only way to get granting aid money, if you like, from central government is to improve the number of houses in one level of flood risk to a safer level of flood risk. What we're saying and what we're doing for this programme is saying that nature, biodiversity, social, all of those elements, water quality, have a value. And what we're trying to look at is how we can put a value on that and how those values can then be assessed in the future, which can open up a much wider range of schemes to lots of people to deliver, because the money banding will be wider. It won't just be, hopefully, just related to houses, which it currently is at the moment.
Yeah, I was just going to go back to the point about protecting and enhancing the environment. So absolutely, that was a duty on the water companies in developing their water resource management plans and therefore their business plans to have that objective in mind. So inevitably, as a water company, for example, if we're taking water from the environment, we might well have an effect on it. If we have a significant effect and we're really impacting it, then we need to do something about that to ensure it's sustainable. And we have an agreed process that we work with the Environment Agency and others called the Water Industry National Environment Programme to address all aspects of unsustainable abstraction. And increasingly, it's not just about turning off a borehole or reducing abstraction from a borehole, if that, for example, happens to be impacting on a wetland. It's about enhancing and restoring that site afterwards as well. And tied in with that, and it was mentioned earlier on, it's important that we monitor that progress with that. So absolutely, from an abstraction perspective, the water companies are very much involved in that aspect of in restoring the environment as well.
Okay, thanks. Now, final round, so I'm going to read out several questions and then invite the panel to comment on any of them, okay? Should we focus more resourcing on educating and empowering our young people to demand more efficient water use in the county? Where can households obtain guidance, advice, and potentially financial assistance for initiatives to preserve water, i.e. grey water systems, green roofs, etc.? When is there likely to be an end to the constant pumping of sewage into our freshwater and seawater, which is causing conditions which will eventually lead to new epidemics of cholera and other waterborne toxic disasters? What will you do to gather the missing data on water usage by agriculture, industry, and health? What are some controversial, difficult decisions that may need to be made about managing water supply and demand, given we are in a water-stressed area and this crisis demands concerted action? And then finally, how do you measure whether 75% NFM target is met? So I invite any of you to address any of those or any other final thoughts you've got, and then we're going to stop.
I'm happy just to talk about education and consistent messaging. So I think it was talked about, do the public really understand the needs to save water and what the targets are for doing that? And I think the reality is some people clearly do and understand it very well, and there's and I think that's improving, but there's a lot more work to do, and the Environment Agency I'm aware of is working on a piece of work coming up with some consistent messaging that will provide a line of sight between customers' use of water for the customer and how that water has an effect on the environment. Now, whether that's through treatment in terms of the use of chemicals and energy and the carbon footprint associated with that, or whether it's actual impact on the environment from where the water's abstracted, there's more work to be done on that. So I think tying that in with our water efficiency messaging, and to say, for example, impact on chalk streams, for example, which is obviously a topical thing and very important thing at the moment, and also our drought messaging as well during those times is really important. So I think that project will complete in the next few months and will be shared with the regional groups, who in turn then can share it with all its members, of which, as you saw earlier from Paul's slide, there's a lot in Water Resources East. So I think we all then have an obligation to try and use that consistent messaging to try and inform people. It's not something that I think the water companies can just do on their own.
Any other thoughts?
So for the person who asked about where you can find out information, Catchment to Coast website has got information about all the products we're using. Information is also uploaded on that about how efficient they are, any problems we've had, the good, bad, the ugly. So that's catchmenttocoast.co.uk. So please do have a look at that website. Everything is on there. Again, we're basically having a school programme developed, which is in line with all our objectives. And I think the key thing for Catchment to Coast is that we don't look at water as a problem, either too much or not enough. I think quite often we go out and say, we've got a drought, we can't use any water. And then the next minute we go, we've got a flood, there's too much water. So what we're trying to say through Catchment to Coast is this is a natural cycle, and what we've got to do is change our behaviours and the way we do things. So basically the way we manage water. So we kind of even that flow out throughout the year. And I think that's a really important message. And we need to get away from flood, drought. We need to look at water as a complete cycle.
Thank you very much to the panel for your contributions and your time. Much appreciated. And thank you to all you for the fantastic questions and comments that are here. And we're now going to close, I think, aren't we, Peter, and have the coffee break?
Now is one of the major events, really, of this summit, because we're now going to come to the actual launch of our Essex Water Strategy, and that's the whole purpose of today, not only talking about it and finding out a lot more about the data, which has been really interesting so far, and the questions have been great and interesting as well. And it shows you how much interest is in water and how close it is to everybody. But moving on to what we're here for now, the Essex Water Strategy, there's going to be two speakers, and I'm really delighted to welcome Lucy Shepherd and Gilo Mertim. And the two of them are going to walk through the strategy, but especially Lucy. And then what I want to also mention, one or two of you have mentioned about the questions coming through to Slido. All of those questions will get archived, and we will do our best to answer all of those. And I've also seen several of you scribbling and making notes. And of course, we're going to be sending all the presentations out to you as well. So just a reminder, please feel free to note whatever you like, but you will get a lot of this information forwarded to you pretty rapidly after this summit today as well. So, do keep your questions coming on Slido, because it's great for us, because, we know what's being asked and it helps the flow to the panelists. So, I'm really delighted to welcome Lucy and Tim, but before they come on stage, there's a bit of a surprise today. Gilo is, would you believe, not only 18 years old, but she's actually 18 years old today. So can we wish her happy birthday and give her a round of applause? Happy birthday. Oh, to be 18 again, well done. Okay, so let me just give you a brief outline of what Lucy is. Lucy Shepherd, just a quick bio, so you've got a little bit of background here. Lucy joined the Essex County Council in 2010 and became lead local flood authority manager in 2013. And Lucy's heart lies with trying to preserve the biodiversity and nature, and you can tell that from the way that she's going to speak. And her latest project has been managing this rather complex delivery of the Essex Water Strategy, and I know it's been a passion of hers as well. And Gilo is a member of the Young Essex Assembly as well, which is a youth group in Essex that aspires to enable young people to have a voice, and you're going to hear that today. So welcome to that, and I'm pleased you have the opportunity. And Gilo is thrilled to have been given this opportunity to be at the Essex Water Strategy, and she is also going to launch the strategy today in conjunction with Lucy. So in which case, I think I'd probably be better sit down and invite Lucy and Gilo to come up and give you that presentation of our Essex water strategy. Thank you. Lucy.
Thank you. So, afternoon. No, still morning. Hi. We've heard from Paul today about the regional plan, and we've heard from our water companies about what they're doing within their patches. And let's bring it back again now to the Essex water strategy. So really excited to launch that today. Essex has actually been classified as water stressed since 2007. This is not a recent thing, but for whatever reason, water just hasn't had a focus. So led by our climate action plan for Essex, this water strategy has now been delivered. And I actually have to thank so many of you that are here today in being part of that work and that development. Good to see you. So as we've heard from John, climate change is having an impact on our water. So here you've got a couple of flood maps focused in on Malden. So the left-hand side is flood risk from sea and rivers. Right-hand side is risk from surface water. And you can see the numbers there. We have a lot of people at risk when it rains too much, but don't let that fool you. Remember what John said about summer rainfall being down like nearly 50%. So what we need to do is look at these mapped areas as opportunity areas, opportunity for green and blue infrastructure, opportunities for capturing water so we can have it in times when we need it. We've heard a lot about numbers and megalitres. Just for scale, there is a megalitre cube there, 10 metres on all sides. And the numbers are big, as Paul said. It's 800 megalitres for the whole of the region. Anglian Water, public water supply only, is down. Deficit's about 477 megalitres per day by 2050. And in the water strategy work, we've brought all of our 4 water supply company numbers together, and we've worked out that for Essex County, our deficit by 2050 will be nearly 150 megalitres per day if we do nothing. Now, of course, water companies, our 4 water supply companies, are doing things, as we've heard. But on the right-hand side, you'll see that it's not just public water supply we need to think about. We've got to think about industry, agriculture, who abstract water separately as part of different abstraction licenses. And you can see here that for Essex, if we look at enhancing our environment so that it not only survives, but it thrives, our agricultural abstraction licenses might need to be cut by up to 60%. And we have nearly 100 abstraction licenses in Essex for spray irrigation. So that could really change what we see growing here in Essex, impacts on employment, and it's other industries as well that could be really impacted by this water deficit. So within our water strategy, we do reference the NFU and CLA water management strategies as well. And you'll see that later in the tool. It's not just water supply that is a problem, it's water quality. Again, this statistic is quite shocking. Only 5 out of our 91 water bodies meet good ecological status, so 5%. And even further than that, we actually have more poor than average as well. So 18 out of our 91 water bodies are classed as poor. And remember that government target is for 75% of our water bodies to be good ecological status or near natural conditions. So why is this in Essex? Again, our water strategy has looked into the detail from Environment Agency published data around this. Around a third is water industry discharges. Around a third is linked to agricultural activity. And around a third, again, is built environment and transport runoff. So something we all need to look at and be more aware of. So, as I said, water has tended to fall a bit behind on our climate agenda versus waste, transport, recycling. And that's partly probably due to the fact that it's a really difficult jigsaw to kind of piece together. You'll see here our water company boundaries, not just 4 water companies, but 6 water resource management zones. Next to that, you'll see our catchment boundaries. We also have 3 regional flood and coastal committee boundaries. We also have 12 local planning authorities. And we actually are covered by 2 regional water planning groups as well. So Water Resources East, who we've worked closely with, cover the majority of Essex. Water Resources South East also cover parts of Essex. So what the Essex Water Strategy does is break through these multiple plans, data sets, documents, and it puts that jigsaw together for Essex as a place that we all relate to living and working, and functioning within. So you could say that actually there are massive opportunities here to collaborate. We talked a lot about collaboration, talked a lot about integrated water management. By having so many together and perhaps sharing the aims and recommendations that we've put forward in the Essex Water Strategy, we could actually do great things and make great progress. Public concern, we did, Councillor Shawir mentioned the Essex Resident Survey we undertook. The concern has increased massively in the last 2 years, so it's up by 30% as one of the top environmental concerns for Essex residents. But 84% of people didn't know that we were in a water-stressed area. And as I said, that's been since 2007. 84% of people didn't know. And 95% of people were not aware that the target is to reduce public water use by 20% by 2038. And 58% of people said they felt that was because they just didn't know that water shortage was an issue. And I'll talk to you a little bit about a tool that we have created to hopefully help with that problem. So what is the water strategy for Essex? As of 9 a.m. this morning, it was published on the Essex County Council Plans and Strategies page. We have a PDF document with 30 recommendations in it. We have also, Gillo's going to come and demonstrate, created the Essex Water Your Future water literacy, water learning tool. And we've also, as I mentioned, pulled together a lot of data from all of our partners, and we've put that together in a Power BI powered storyboard, which is available on the Essex Open Data Portal. So our recommendations. These are very much focused on a multi-sector set of recommendations, which we can all work towards 3 common themes: reducing our demand, changing our land use for water, and alternative supply options. Every single one of our 30 recommendations is linked to existing government recommendations or commitments that others, such as water companies, have made. Altogether, the government have 130 recommendations, and when you add on their chalk stream strategies, it goes up, beyond 150 recommendations and commitments already. So our recommendations are about building those into business as usual. All of us taking action so that we consider water, so we embed water in our other strategies and plans, make it part of our climate action work. And we need to learn from some of the others we've heard from today, taking on board those pilots, perhaps climate catchment to coast projects, the learning, breaking down those barriers so that we can make change as soon as possible for water.
Hello everybody, it's really nice to be here today. So as was earlier mentioned, my name is Gillo and I'm a part of the Young Essex Assembly, which as previously was said, is just kind of a youth group that aspire for young people across Essex to have a voice. So we partnered up with the Environment and Climate Action project. So we've worked together, and in total what we've created is the youth participation in the Essex Water Strategy. So early on last year, Lucy came to us, the Young Essex Assembly, at one of our meetings, and she basically came and presented this idea to us, and they presented the original draft for the website. So we were able to have that printed out on large scale. So then we were kind of asked what we think about it and what we would add in if we needed to, or what we would take out. So from that, what we kind of came up with is some of the ideas, as you can see on the screen. So we basically just drew in what we think needed to be added and things like that. So the top one is actually mine that says water cycle at the top. So that was early on last year. And it's just us basically thinking that perhaps it needed to be more personalised in some aspects, etc. So we were kind of showed this original design, and that's the things that we added in. We wanted to make it more relatable and kind of exclusive so that people can really, really understand and kind of get in touch with Essex and know that this is an issue that should really be stressed. So we also from that then recently I've sent out a feedback form. So I sent this out to the rest of the Young Essex Assembly. So I sent out these 4 questions. So did you learn something? Is everything in the right place? Will you change your behaviour? And how is the level of information? So these are kind of the things that a lot of the people said. As you can see, quite a few people did learn things. Everybody said that they would change their behaviour, so that's pretty good. I think that is the very first step to this project being successful, and the level of info was very good. So then just some general comments that people said was that it's a very good interactive resource and that they learned very new things and they learned things that they didn't know. So I think quite a popular kind of fun fact that people learned was about the beavers in the dens. So that was quite interesting. So we're just going to go ahead and show this draft of the website. So if at the back you could please play the video for me.
Understanding water challenges for Essex and how they are managed is not easy. We've developed the Essex Water Your Future website with the Young Essex Assembly to help. Move around the online world to find out more about how things like climate change and human influence are affecting our water. Click on the icons to learn how desalination, the actions you take at home, and nature recovery are all part of the solution. You can find short videos and read case studies about projects already going on. Start exploring to learn how we can work together in Essex for clean and plentiful water.
Thank you so much. I just think it's really amazing to see the final draft of the website and how far we've gone. So I'm just going to head to this slide, and I just want you guys to remember that you can always just keep an update with what's going on with the pages. So on Instagram, our handle is Essex Climate Commission. On Facebook, our handle is Essex Climate Action. And then on X, or formerly known as Twitter, it's Essex Climate. So if you guys could just keep up to date, we'd really, really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you very much, Sheila, and thank you very much, Lucy, for introducing the amazing strategy that we have for Essex. We're earlier than, well in advance of our time, so that's good. We were slightly behind, so I'm pleased to see that we got time. So in which case, I think what I'd like to do actually is move on to the next panel. And the panel is going to be chaired by Robin Price. And Robin is the Director of Quality and Environment at Anglian Water. And he spent over 20 years in scientific roles of the company, including 8 years as head of water quality, and also as being managing director of Water Resources East until just in January 22. So, Robin, would you like to come up with all of the panelists, please? And there is quite a long time for this session, and obviously Robin's going to go through and introduce all of the panelists as well, and there'll be plenty of time for Q&As at the end. So again, if you please put all of the questions onto Slido, Robin will be able to read them out and ask the panelists to then make their various comments. So, Robin, I think in that case, when you're ready, please.
So yeah, thank you very much indeed for the opportunity to be part of today's fantastic event, and congratulations particularly to all involved in the Essex Water Strategy. And it's fantastic to see the multi-sector nature of it, the recognition of just how complex these issues are, and the fact that we've all got to pull together to do something about it. And water quality, the water quality challenges are certainly no different here. And I'm really, really excited to have a very exciting panel. I think I know everybody except for Pete. Really good example. We're going to have some really good discussion around kind of water quality and some of the challenges. I'll very briefly introduce the panel. Thank you very much, Peter, for the kind introduction to me. Phil Cotier is Director of Place for Broadland District Council and South Norfolk. And Phil has led the Norfolk response to nutrient neutrality. You heard Paul mention nutrient neutrality and the restrictions around, the very real restrictions around housing growth due to excess nutrients in river catchments in Norfolk. Phil is director of the newly established Norfolk Environmental Credits, a public sector-owned trading platform designed to trade environmental credits to the development industry, and has recently secured nutrient mitigation, which will offset approximately 2,000 new homes, so a really good start to the process. To Phil's left is Joe Bradley. Joe spent 28 years working on pollution prevention in the Environment Agency before developing a focus on pollution from urban surfaces and roads. So really interesting thing that's been mentioned today. In September 2020, Joe became Director of Operations for Stormwater Shepherds UK, where she's now dedicated to the pursuit of better stormwater management and the development of a funding mechanism to deliver that management. And Joe was very recently on BBC Breakfast, so if you need a standing in a small stream near Chorley, so if you need an autograph, Joe is recently doing an awful lot of work to publicise this issue, which is fantastic. Pete, who's going to be third on, is a fourth-generation farmer Pete Thompson, fourth-generation farmer, growing field veg, fruit, and now olives. And Pete's career has revolved around innovation and sustainability, which is fantastic. And in 2023, the farming business fully diversified into restorative and natural capital farming services and contracting, tree wholesale and retail supply, and also olive farming, apparently. So there we are. And in 2024, Pete has really spearheaded the creation of the new tendering farm cluster. It'd be really interesting to hear views on farm clusters. And certainly last but no means least, Anna Helm-Baxter is a passionate wild swimmer and a member of the Manningtree Mermaids swimming group. And we last met at Manningtree Water Recycling Centre a couple of months back. Anna co-leads the swim campaign, which is Safe Water in Manningtree. In addition, she's had a 20-year career in food media, including working with top-rated TV shows, magazines, and internationally renowned chefs. She's the author of 7 cookbooks and the mum to 3 young children. So a really fantastic panel that we're going to hear some really great insight from. Chair's prerogative means I get to say just a couple of words first, if I may. Just see if my slides are loaded up. I understand it's down. There we are, perfect. So I'm just going to say a couple of words very briefly about kind of Anglian Water's response. We've had my colleague Doug talking around water resources and particularly around kind of metering. I'm just going to focus very much on water quality and particularly around river health. And the kind of the presentation title, a very brief couple of slides, is the key word is partnering on river health. And our approach to partnering is under the banner of Get River Positive. We are a purpose-led organisation as Anglian Water. Our purpose is to bring environmental and social prosperity to the region. We've embedded that purpose into our Articles of Association, one of the very first utilities to do that. So as directors of the organisation, forgive another corporate person standing up, but as a director of the organisation, all decisions that we make as a board have to consider environmental prosperity, social prosperity, and also obviously shareholder return. So we have to look across the whole triple bottom line. And we've got 4 very long-term goals and ambitions for this region. And these are kind of set over 25 years, and each of our kind of 5-year funding chunks kind of deliver the next chapter, if you like, of that 25-year story. We are this is a climate summit. We're focusing on water, but this is a climate summit, and we have an ambition to be a net zero carbon business by 2030 and to reduce our carbon emissions by 70% by that time through our embedded carbon in things that we build. We want to work with others to bring significant ecological improvement to catchments. So again, that's all of us in this room. What can we do together to bring significant improvements to get those very damning statistics around the county, around the environment up? How do we make the East of England resilient? How do we play our part in making the East of England resilient to the risk of drought and flooding? And finally, again, a topical conversation, seeing some of the questions, how do we enable sustainable growth, economic and housing growth in the UK's fastest region and in one of the UK's fastest county? And the key word there is sustainable. It isn't growth everywhere. The key is around sustainable growth. And we've just submitted a £9 billion investment plan to Ofwat. Our economic regulator are currently sat looking at this right now. And £9 billion, this is our largest, our kind of 5 years period now is somewhere around about 5 to £6 billion. This is the next level up. £9 billion will be invested. And to answer the question around kind of impact on water bills in 2030 for Anglian Water customers will be around 21 pence per day more. We recognise absolutely that 21% per day is going to be an additional financial burden for many. So again, a big focus on making sure that we eliminate water poverty as we do this, and making sure that no one is unable to pay and has to make some of the choices that were kind of being discussed in a question earlier. 1.1 billion of that investment is going to be spent directly in the environment. So, and Essex will be getting a very large, significant share of that investment that we'll be making. And this will include 570 million tackling storm overflows, 638 million pounds tackling nutrients, and our water resource management plan, which has been well discussed so far, is just over a billion, 1.02 billion pounds. The uncomfortable truth with that, though, is that that investment will not change those statistics about river water quality. This investment alone will not increase the number of water bodies reaching good ecological status. All of the water bodies are impacted by complex factors. So you will see I actually haven't shown the reasons for not achieving good ecological status map. There's the pie chart that Lucy just showed that talks about the reasons. Whilst it's very interesting, there is no catchment where there is one single sector that's having the impact. So there is no sector, there's no catchment where we cannot all work together. So standing up here saying, actually, it's more farming, it's more roads, it's more the water, it's just not a place I ever want to be in. We've got to work together. We've got to take a place-based approach. We've got to look at the issues facing the place that we care about, whether that be a river catchment, a town, a county, a region, doesn't matter. And we've got to work together. And our approach to this is we have made a series of river pledges, of Get River Positive pledges, and we're working in partnership with Severn Trent Water. We made identical pledges to Severn Trent, so we're making the same pledges, the main commitment to the environment from mid Wales right the way through to the East Anglian coast and up to Lincolnshire. So a big geographic area. And the first pledge is absolutely to make sure that our storm overflows, our abstraction and our operations do not harm rivers. I have no legitimacy whatsoever to stand here and talk about anything beyond this if any of our activities are causing harm. And we know that they are. We know that there are reasons why we don't achieve good ecological status. Largely, it's related to nutrients. It's related to phosphate coming from water recycling centres, sewage works. And there's a big chunk that's related to abstraction. So we've got to deal with those. And any harm is completely unacceptable. We want to create more opportunities for everyone to enjoy our region's rivers, and we'll hear a lot more from Anna about the campaigning that swimming groups are doing to improve water quality so that water is safe. The recreational importance of water escapes nobody, so we have to make sure our rivers, our seas are safe places and enjoyable places to be in and around. We want to support others to improve and care for rivers. So this is absolutely working in partnership, particularly with landowners, and we've just started the conversation with the highways authorities as well around roads. Again, if I was to stand up here and start quoting statistics about farming's worse than everything we've heard about today is around land use change. We've got to change the way land is used. And if I stand up here and say, can I build a wetland, Mr. and Mrs. Landowner, and I've been stood up here criticising and saying they're worse than us, and pointing fingers, I ain't going to get anywhere at all. So again, back to everything we need to do is going to need a change in the way that we manage land. Brilliant to see that writ large in the Essex strategy. We want to enhance our rivers and create new habitats for wildlife to thrive. So again, there are some amazing exemplars kind of happening within the county. Archie's here. Many of you have been to Spain's Hall Estate, I'm sure, seeing the landscape scale restoration. There are other absolutely superb examples in the county and within the region around where new habitats are being created and wildlife is thriving. And then the final one is being much, much more open about our performance and our transparency. If you need some information around Anglian Water, if you go back 2 years, you want some information about water quality, I'm going to need a couple of environmental information requests. I'm going to have to come to your scrutiny committee. You're going to have to drag it out of me. What a load of rubbish. That needs to be publicly available for you all on our phones. You need to know what's going on. You need to know what's going on and what impact we as an organisation and as a sector are having. And we're delivering this through through our kind of strategic delivery plans. We've heard about our water resources management plan, our environment programme, our drainage and wastewater management plan. And we also have a very successful community partnership driven, driving a lot through community partnerships through Get River Positive grants. And so far we've spent just over £6 million, and all of this is our owners' money. This is shareholders' money. This is not customers' money I'm spending here with Get River Positive. This is our shareholders. This is foregone dividends. But importantly, we've spent just over £5 million, and we've pulled in just shy of £9 million worth of partnership funding. There is no shortage of money out there to invest in this stuff, in the environment. What we need scale, we need governance, and we need a bit of imagination, and we need to stop criticising each other and just pull together in these places. We're funding 60 plus projects right there across the region. The map is a terrible map because there's a lot more going on in Essex than is shown there, but we are working with multiple partnership partners right the way across the region. And the point we're trying to make, we are trying to scale this up to our advanced WINEP. So our WINEP now is slightly disappointing in that it's very output-based. It's fix that sewage works, it's reduce that abstraction, it's point source stuff. We want to stand back and say, actually, if we focus on the outcome, what is the outcome we want for this place that we care about, and what is the way that we deliver it? What's the governance that we need? How are we going to do that? So our rural focus is very much on Norfolk and the River Lark catchment, but our urban focus is very much in Essex, and Southend is our kind of urban exemplar. We want to make Southend an international exemplar for surface water management. Some of the stuff that Joe talked about is absolutely inspirational. We're going to be investing about £100 million alongside Southend City Council in really greening up the city and managing surface water in a very, very different way, much more collaborative way, and that will reduce storm overflows, that will improve outcomes, will drive a thriving tourism economy, and it will make the sea safer to be part of. So just a very brief introduction from Anglian Water, just to set the scene. I'm very honoured to chair the next panel. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon. My name is Phil Cortu. As you can see, I feel like I'm the token outsider that's been invited from Norfolk down to Essex. I can assure you I was born and brought up in Colchester, so I do feel I have a slight right to be here as well. You've heard the term nutrient neutrality. Clearly we've been talking about water quality. If I asked you to come and stand up here and give a good explanation of nutrient neutrality, who would be able to do that? Just put your hand up. Good, it sort of justifies me being here then, doesn't it, a little bit? So, I mean, nutrient neutrality is something that we're seeing more and more around these sorts of environmental issues, whether it's carbon offsetting or biodiversity net gain. You see development having an impact and an adverse impact, and you simply need to offset that by other means in order to have a neutral impact upon the environment. So in 2022, March 2022, so literally 2 years ago, we heard that there were two watercourses in Norfolk, the Wensum and the Broads, that were in an adverse condition. And the environmental qualities of both of those water bodies were so high, of international status, and because they were in an adverse effect, we were not allowed to issue another planning permission for overnight accommodation until we reduced the nutrient levels of both phosphate and nitrates in those water bodies. So 2 years later, we are still backlogged by about 16,000 homes which are waiting to be granted planning permission because there are too many nutrients in those water bodies. So a profound impact when we're facing a housing crisis for many of our people, many of our young people who can't afford homes, and yet we've still got a 16,000 home backlog, predominantly because of nutrient neutrality. So, as you can see, it's like carbon offsetting. If you go on a flight and you pay a bit extra, someone else may plant some trees which will offset your carbon, so there's a neutral effect. Nutrient neutrality is the same. I'm not expecting you to see the detail of this. That is the extent of the catchment for which nutrient neutrality is affecting us in Norfolk. It is the vast majority of it, and it is definitely the areas of highest growth, predominantly around Norwich itself. Interestingly, Robin was saying the source of the problem comes from multiple sources. Not expecting you to see the pie chart in detail on the side of this slide, but again, that shows you the breakdown of the sources of those phosphates and nitrates. It's a major issue. So what have we done about it? So again, similar to what Robin was saying, recognise it's a catchment-wide problem that needs a catchment-wide solution. So 4 of the local authorities, Broadland and South Norfolk, Breckland and North Norfolk, with Norwich City committed to also join in this work alongside Anglian Water, formed a company, so an arm's length company owned by public sector shareholders in order to create a trading platform where nutrient credits could be secured and then sold to developers. Not for profit, so then any money made would then be recycled back into securing more mitigation to offset nitrates and phosphates in order to sell more credits to developers, creating a cyclical arrangement. Funding secured both from the councils, but then also future credit sales, and also we've recently secured some DLUC funding. Organisations like UEA providing professional expertise, Royal Haskoning, Natural England providing professional expertise to advise and guide. And the sorts of mitigations that we're securing, we're looking to roll out a large-scale strategic conversion of septic tanks. We think we've got thousands of septic tanks within our catchment each septic tank you convert, you can normally create such an offset as to offset about 10 new dwellings. So we can pay for someone to convert their septic tank. We can pay an incentive in addition to that, and we can recoup enough money by selling those credits to developers that we can keep that process cycling around. So we're helping homeowners, we're improving the environment, and we're getting growth going as well. That's just one example. There are multiple other mitigation proposals that we're looking at. I'll finish very quickly, just to say, you may be thinking,
sorry, it's my idiot question. Convert septic tanks into what?
private package treatment plants. My apologies, it's a very important gap that I missed out on. So yeah, if you've got a septic tank, then you are seeing raw phosphates and nitrates leaching out into the environment. If you turn it into a private package treatment plant, then you don't have that same impact. Good question, thank you. If you're sitting here thinking, well, that's fine, that's happening in Norfolk, it doesn't happen down here, you're right, but it may do. This is not something that is now just a line drawn in the sand and it won't affect other areas. There are 74 district councils that are affected by nutrient neutrality already. That's a programme that may roll out. If it doesn't affect you around nutrient neutrality, then biodiversity net gain will have a similar effect. And so this trading company can also trade biodiversity net gain credits. We're also seeing areas such as Horsham and some of the Sussex authorities struggling with water neutrality, where they're not allowed to grant planning permission until they address the issue of water shortages. So, yes, this area isn't affected by nutrient neutrality at the moment, but these sorts of things will only be rolled out more and more. I'll stop there. Happy to take any questions in due course.
I didn't bring any slides, so you'll just have to imagine. So I'm Jo Bradley, I work for Stormwater Shepherds. We are a very small charity that work on reducing pollution from urban surfaces, microplastic pollution, but also chemical pollution. So some of the work we've done in the last few years has focused on, we were looking for phosphorus in urban surfaces in a town called Bolton. So we did lots of sampling for looking at phosphorus from roofs and industrial yards and roads in Bolton. So we've got some data there, which was useful for the nutrient neutrality stuff. More recently, I've been scampering around golf courses in Southampton, taking samples to see what levels of pollution we get from golf courses, which I think may be a significant contributor, but we need to finish that sampling before we get a solution. We're about to look at horse stables to see what levels of pollution come from horse stables, because they fall through the gaps when we look at agricultural pollution, and it's something where we think we could possibly help to reduce that level of pollution. But anybody that knows me well will know that my favourite topic, if that's the right word, is pollution from highways. So I've been working on pollution from highways for over a decade. At the moment working with an organisation called SciWem to write a paper on pollution from highways and what we can do about it. And the reason I'm really glad to be here today, and I'm very glad that Lucy invited me, is that people have talked about this sources of pollution in British rivers and talked about agriculture, sewage and urban runoff. And if you look at the press or follow Twitter or some of the social media accounts, you'll see that sewage pollution has dominated for the last couple of years. Everybody's talking about sewage pollution, everybody's talking about storm overflows. There is now a shift to talk a little bit more about agricultural pollution. So somebody's prosecuting the Environment Agency, I think, for failing to control agricultural pollution on the River Wye. So there's a little bit more conversation now about pollution from agriculture. The poor relation is still and has always been pollution from urban surfaces. Very few people talk about it. It was just me for a very long time, or it felt like it. And there's very little investigation into this pollution from road runoff and urban surfaces. And I have a real problem with that, which is why I carry on banging on about it. We've talked a lot about sewage, as I said. Robin's just talked earlier about focusing on place and considering place, but actually for me we should be considering harm to the aquatic environment, and we lose sight very often of why we are doing pollution control and why we are talking about pollution reduction, and we forget that it's all about the creatures that live in and are supported by the river. And we've got to keep that focus on aquatic organisms. And road runoff is a real problem in that respect because it's poisonous. So the things that are in road runoff, polyaromatic hydrocarbons and toxic metals that are in road runoff, are poisonous to the creatures that live in the river. But they don't just kill them. It would actually be better for me if they killed them, because they'd all float to the surface and there would be an outcry, and Fergal sharky would suddenly be distracted by dead insects. But they don't die. They're deformed and mutated. They fail to thrive. They fail to reproduce. They degrade, so they die slowly. So they don't all just go, dead, float, which would be helpful. It's a nasty, insidious, long-term pollution that we're paying no attention to. And we've talked about, Robin's mentioned the drainage and wastewater management plans, which the water companies have spent a lot of time putting together. The drainage and wastewater management plans do not account for highway runoff conveyed into the water environment through water company assets. The Environment Agency river basin plans do not identify specific highway discharges causing pollution of watercourses. They use a generic term about infrastructure and transport. National highways know where their 25,000 outfalls are. They have a map layer, but why are they not then included in the reasons for not achieving good in the river basin plans as individual outfalls? And the Environment Agency monitoring programme doesn't measure pollution from highways. So nobody takes samples. You have to take them in the rain because they only discharge when it's raining. And you have to take them downstream of the highway in order to capture those pollutants and measure those levels of pollution. And that isn't included in the monitoring programme. So we have an insidious pollutant that's causing toxic harm to the water environment that nobody is measuring and nobody is regulating. And so the intention of the paper we're hoping to publish is just to bring that up, to level that balance so that we've got sewage, agriculture and urban runoff on an equal footing, because at the moment we haven't. Thank you.
Hi everyone. As you heard, I'm a farmer, so I've got no slides because A, I'm lazy, B, Lucy gave me a get out clause, and C, the only thing farmers write down is rainfall, and that's quite depressing at the moment. We've got 80 years of records at the farm, and we've undoubtedly had more in the last winter than we've ever had before. So it's a little bit of context. I was farming about 700 acres of veg, field brassicas, cabbages, spring onions, etc. And we walked away from that roughly this time last year. Actually, a year exactly today, we sent the last veg crops out of the door. One of the considerations for that decision was not having the confidence that we would have enough water to keep growing the volumes and quality of crop that we needed to. And that is despite building roughly a reservoir a decade. We've got 5 reservoirs on the farm. So we now have some water, which we now can do something else with, potentially. And yes, we do have some olives, but they don't use much water. Instead of growing the veg, we've gone 100% land use change. So all our land is now allocated to woodland carbon creation, the UK Woodland Grant, or biodiversity net gain. We have let go our very best land to a farmer that's going to carry on farming it, and we are acquiring land that is poor so we can restore it for biodiversity net gain and some more restorative, extensive farming. Because I was banging on about natural capital, various other natural capital anoraks, looking at you, Simon, suggested I, along with David Lord, a regenerative farmer in Tendring, set up a new tendering farm cluster. Now, for those of you who don't know them, farm clusters have been around a while. Essex is a little bit late to the party, but we've got 3 up and running now, I think. And I know there's another one in the pipeline at least. And it's with the help of generous funding from Essex County Council, Get River Positive Fund, RSPB, and I really hope I haven't committed a faux pas by forgetting anyone else. I don't think so yet. But basically it's getting farmers together within a local geography to deliver environmental impact, environmental improvement. So we're working as a group, we're farmer-led, so farmers can come to meetings where they'll be spoken to by other farmers or one person that's invited of our choosing to help with this pathway, finding new ways to farm, finding how they can access capital and opportunities for natural capital to complement their farming business, not to replace it, to complement it. This fits in nicely of helping deliver the government's targets from the Environment Act 2021, and in turn the Essex LNRS, Local Nature Recovery Strategy. One thing we're doing is we've put in a NERF application, NERF 3, Natural Environment Investment Readiness Fund, and we're focusing on water. Now, there have been other NERF projects in Essex, a lot of focus on carbon and biodiversity, so we thought that's been done, we're going to go for water. Because of where tendering is, there's not much sourcing of water for drinking water in the area. We're more about water quality. We're at the end of the line, so what we can do is influence water quality, and in particular, the quality of the coastal shallows. So all the water around the store and going down south past the Sunshine Coast, etc. And to do that, we're working with Finance Earth, a consultancy, and a tech company called Aquascope. So if we get the funding from this summer, we'll start deploying measuring monitoring devices so that we can look at dissolved carbon, dissolved nutrients, touching on nutrient neutrality there potentially, eDNA, touching on what Anna's going to talk about, turbidity, and see if we can get some baselines such that we can then identify land use changes that we can then also monitor and see how that can drag up the quality of the water and improve the flow. Very importantly, this is also a way of trying to set a value on what we can do for water. And we've spoken about values earlier on in some of the questions. There is lots of capital sloshing around if you want to do reservoirs, or there was, and that's quite widely the case in agriculture. We can get capital for one-off things. What we can't get is revenue to support consistently good practices going forwards. Which is, that's what we hope this NERF will support. Look forward to questions afterwards.
Hi everyone, I'm Anna Hornbackster. I am a campaigner for SWIM, Safe Water in Manningtree, and we've been campaigning for the last few years to have cleaner, safer water in Manningtree, but also up and down the country. I'm going to introduce you to the River Stour. This is where we swim. It's a tidal estuary. It forms the border between Essex and Suffolk. It's an area of outstanding natural beauty. It is a conservation area, and it is a magnificent place to swim. This is Manningtree Beach, where we swim, and where we've done a lot of work with local stakeholders to make this a place that's accessible for all, not just for swimmers, but for the sailors that come there, for the kids who learn how to sail, who paddleboard, who do beach school there. And so that has involved, I'm on the Manningtree Town Council, but we have also reached out to all of the local sort of stakeholders to have facilities like the sailing club put in towel hooks for us. We have sand on the beach that's funded by the town council. There's a sun cream dispenser. We really want it to be a place where people can come and use this precious resource, especially during a time when there's a cost of living crisis and lots of people don't have access to swimming pools anymore, or can't afford to go to a gym. It's this really precious resource to have. So people have been swimming in Manningtree for at least 100 years. We know this from our historical society, so that there's precedence for swimming there. But it wasn't until lockdown, when a lot of people were going stir crazy at home and not able to get out and not able to exercise and see other people, that the formation of the Manningtree Mermaids happened. So we started as an individual group, and we are now a group of over 1,000 members, which is pretty good considering we're England's smallest town with about 1,600, I think, in our census. So I think there's a few extras who are interested in our story and our journey. And we have been campaigning to end sewage pollution. And I can't say we've been ultimately successful in that yet because we haven't ended sewage pollution, but we have been doing our darndest to make a lot of noise. There have been a lot of elements in our campaign that have been successful, and I would say for any community groups, I don't know if anyone here is an activist themselves, that I think have helped us in the process. So I think one is the local engagement. We've engaged with all our local stakeholders, including Anglian Water. Robin mentioned that we met in trying to educate people on the issue. We went to all the local parish councils to talk to them. We went to all the local primary schools to talk to the kids about the 3 Ps, pee, poop, and paper, which they love, the only things that you can flush down the toilet. We took bottles of sewage that we got from the sewage treatment works in Manningtree to show them and really educate them about it. I think we've been really careful about the language that we use. We obviously want to hold bad parties to account, but we're very careful we want to work together. But we also want to tell people what we mean when we hear certain words. So for instance, Robin referred to the sewage treatment works as the water recycling center, and I don't think that means much to anybody. It's where sewage is treated, right? The CSO pipes that we refer to, that doesn't mean anything to most people. So depending on the audience that we're talking to, they're either sewage pipes or they're shit pipes. Like, that's what's coming into the water. So we've also had success through strong images, right? So this is a photo you're seeing of us, gone past already. A photo of us at a campaign or a protest that we led. We have colorful pictures, and that's really helped us garnish the use of that's really helped us with our media presence. The media have loved the images of us, and we have really harnessed that and capitalized on that. We have done everything from BBC Breakfast News to being on the local parish council podcast, and all of that has sort of helped spread the message. We're continually reaching out to keep this story in the press because it keeps people interested in what's going on. And we've also teamed up with the University of Essex, who are now helping us with a testing program to help us give a much bigger picture about the health quality of our river. I think one of the things that really has helped people get behind our campaign is the fact that it's not a political issue. And what's interesting is we've had a few circumstances where we've worked with bigger stakeholders who don't want to get involved with us because they think it's a political issue. But on our swim group of our 1,000+ members, it doesn't matter which party you're on. People care about the water that we swim in, and people are disgusted by the fact that there is sewage being pumped into our rivers. So it's an easy one for people to get behind. So this led to us campaigning for bathing designations to some of the press that we've had. So our current campaign, which is for bathing designation, and I'll be happy to take questions about bathing designation. For us, bathing designation is just a first step. It's not a cure-all. It's not going to necessarily guarantee clean water in our rivers, and I think that is one of the common misconceptions, and again, where language is so important. A lot of people assume bathing designation means a place is safe for swimming. And it doesn't actually mean that. It does mean that further investment will be made by Anglian Water to ensure that the water is safe. So for instance, people don't always realize that there's no legal limit to the amount of E. coli and enterococci that can be released in that treated sewage from the water recycling center or sewage treatment works. And so even if you are swimming in a place which has relatively few spills, unless you have good dilution like we do in Manningtree with a tidal estuary, you are potentially putting yourself at risk. But again, I can address more on that down the line in questions if you want to. One of the questions I get asked all the time, which I'll just end this on, and why I think people have gotten behind this issue and how we can sort of garner the imaginations of people in trying to solve the water crisis that we have in Essex. So I get asked all the time, why do you swim? Why do you swim in this river where all we see is news about sewage being pumped into it, about it, people getting sick and unwell? And I think time and time again, you'll hear swimmers say, oh, mental health, it's, physical health, it's the sense of community you get. And I think all of that is true. But I think the thing that unites all of us and why our campaign and why it has been so strong and why the campaigns of so many other wild swimming groups up and down the country have been successful is nature. It's a connection to nature. Because when you're out there, when you're in the water, when you're on the water, when you're by the water, you feel connected with nature. I work full time. I'm a mum with 3 kids. I'm here I'm the least qualified person in this room to be talking about, the water issues in Essex. I'm here because I'm passionate, and we need to garner that in other people. And I think we do that by getting a connection with nature. And that maybe starts in schools. It starts by people taking more time to be outside and caring more about their surroundings.
Thank you very much, everybody. Hey, for sticking to time. I think I was the longest speaker, so forgive me for that. Sorry, went on a bit, but yeah, thank you very much. We've got, very, very kind of diverse range, kind of from agriculture, thinking around road runoff, thinking around nutrients, thinking around the crucial aspects of recreation. We've got questions on pretty much all of those topics. If okay, I am going to go by popularity, because otherwise this would be me picking out all the things about sewage that I want to talk to you about, which I won't do, which is not fair at all. Brief dig. The most popular question is, why are there plastic cups in the break? China cups were ordered. It's been answered and everything. So I put this bottled water on the table, not finest Essex and Suffolk or Anglian tap water, so we'll move on from that one. Next one's for you, Phil, is will there be enough appetite amongst landowners to put land forward for nutrient neutrality mitigation? And what happens when there isn't enough land available to continue mitigating against nutrients?
It's a really good question, and it's been a real challenge. I'm going to stand up if that's all right. Is there a landowners are really interested. The first deal we've done is to cease pig farming on a certain site in Norfolk. Pig farms, livestock farms, as we're seeing in the River Wye, chicken farms, create a huge amount of phosphate and nitrate. And some of the uncertainty around something like livestock farming, it's an attractive proposition to then say, well, actually, I'm going to get quite a big lump sum of money and then perhaps an annual payment to mitigate the nutrients arising from that livestock. So yes, they are. But, that's a big but, I am personally concerned about other issues such as food security. And if we just simply see all our land, and certainly our best agricultural land, going to offset those environmental impacts, I think we'll then face another challenge further down the line. That's why we've always said that for Norfolk and what the mitigation we are securing will be a portfolio approach. So yes, there'll be some change of use of land, but there'll also be better buffer strips, riparian buffer strips that help soak up that P&N before it hits the watercourses. We're going to be looking at septic tank conversion to private package treatment plants, as I said earlier. We're going to be looking at water infrastructure and working with Anglia Water to see if we can make further enhancements to their infrastructure. And it's important that we just don't say the answer is all about land change of use. It's about that portfolio approach.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Phil. You mentioned kind of food security. The next most popular question, Pete, is for you, which is, with an uncertain future around water and greater financial incentives for growers to take land out of production to deliver BNG, etc., should we be concerned about our nation's food security?
In short, yes, probably. And it covers the previous question as well. When people are talking about woodland trees, sheep in Wales, it's the answer is right tree, right place. And I don't think anybody sensible is advocating whole-scale rewilding, for sake of a better word, of great tranches of good agricultural land, but marginal agricultural land, low productivity, then there's a decision to be made, and farmers will follow the market. And if they can make a better living from alternative land use, they'll go for that.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. There's a question around the implementation plans for the delivery of the Essex Water Strategy. I won't ask John to come back up on stage kind of thing, but I guess there is a strong delivery plan, a strong implementation plan, and that will be available on the Essex Water Strategy document if we go to the website. Fantastic. So if anyone didn't hear that, so all of the recommendations, the timescales and the actions expected of others in order to kind of to co-deliver the plan are on the website, which we can commend to you. Question from Chris Webb. We have a grey water cleaning facility at Basildon Hospital. What incentives are there to encourage us to install similar facilities at Southend and Broomfield? Well, just a comment from a person. I went to Basildon Hospital about 3 weeks ago. I had a bit of a tour of Essex. I started with Archie Ruggles-Bryce at Spain's Hall, looking at the natural flood management of the beavers. And I went to the Bewley development just in Chelmsford to look at the sustainable urban drainage schemes. And then went to Basildon Hospital, where if you haven't been, there is an absolutely fantastic example of rainwater harvesting. So basically on one of the very large, I think it's the cardiothoracic building, an enormous building, massive roof space. All of the downpipes have been disconnected. They flow through rain gardens. They flow through kind of beautiful planters. And there's an attenuation pond, which is full of nature, which is before everything goes out to the river. So what that is doing is that is cleaning up the water from the roof before it goes in. It is stopping that water ending up in the sewerage system, which is reducing spills. We are seeing less spills in Chelmsford directly as a result of less surface water going into there as well. So really fantastic. And how do we mainstream some of that? That was funded through partnership money between Essex County Council, ourselves, and government funding. So I guess what we need to do is, if there are other examples of kind of good things that we want to do around grey water recycling, rainwater harvesting, etc., on buildings in particular sectors, then talk to talk to the local authority, talk to ourselves, talk to government, but let's work out how we can do some of these things. But there are some really, really exciting innovations kind of happening right now in the county, which we need to see more of, which is great. There we are. Next one is, I'll take this one. Anglian Water fined 2.65 million after sewage discharge into the North Sea in 2023. Largest ever fine. What action are we taking to ensure this is not repeated? Just to confirm, the fine was actually 330,000, not 2.65 million. Still absolutely unacceptable. We pleaded guilty. We had an issue at our Jaywick Water Recycling Centre, and we had some untreated sewage going into a long sea outfall, way out to sea. Doesn't excuse it at all. The incident happened in 2018. We've learned a lot since then, and we continue to invest to make sure that that sort of thing just becomes a thing of the past. And yeah, apologise. It shouldn't have happened anyway. Happened a while ago. A lot of investment since then, but very happy to tackle that and answer that. But the fine was less than quoted. Next question, I do need to pass the microphone on, but is the underlying data required to measure the current, question from Archie Ruggles-Bryce, is the underlying data required to measure the current environmental conditions of rivers and groundwater sufficient to pick up the change that might result from implementing the various strategies? Or do we also need to fund and resource data collection? And if so, what's the scale of the need? I might ask Joe for your comment on kind of data and kind of the collection and what else we need to do, Joe.
Okay, thank you, Robin. So data collection does need to change, but also the way we collect data needs to change. So I don't think we're putting enough attention on the aquatic harm. So measuring insect populations, but not just counting them, looking at them to see if they're actually being affected by the pollution in other ways. So at the moment we count insects, we look at the number of species, the types of species. We do it too infrequently, and we need to do it more often in more places and consider the harm that's been caused to them. And as I said before with the water quality monitoring, we need to do it when it's raining. So it's no good. There was a project recently in the northwest of England that looked for pollution off the motorway, and they went out in the dry weather and found no pollution, which was handy. So we need to be a little bit more careful how we design monitoring programs so that they're actually measuring the pollution that is taking place and when it's taking place. So we need more monitoring and we need invertebrate counting. Citizen scientists are probably going to save us, because there is an army of citizen scientists now who are taking good samples, simple samples, but good samples. They're collating that data. There's a platform being built as we speak, I think, I don't know if it started yet, where that data, well, there's another one, there's Casco, and there's another one, and they're gathering all that data and using that to measure river harm, just because it's the International World Day of Happiness today. One thing to remember is that just because a river is in a terrible state as its monitoring point for the Water Framework Directive doesn't mean the whole river is in a terrible state. If you go up to the headwaters of some of the rivers in Lancashire, they are beautiful and their water quality is still pretty damn good. So don't look at those figures that say everything's dead, it's all awful, we should all hide under the duvet and never come out. Actually, there are stretches of watercourse in this country that are still beautiful.
Thank you. Pete, did you want to just comment on data and then bring you in, Phil?
Yeah, just on that one, so with our NERF application, which I mentioned, I think the data gathering equipment is about 40,000, and that's on 2 very small catchments, and it is still not advanced enough to give sort of constant remote data feeds back to a central point. So Muggins here is going to have to be the one that goes out weekly and reads things off all these ones. The tech is coming, but it's not here yet.
Great. Phil?
And there's a dangerous finger pointing. It's not meant to be that. I think it's also, what do we do with that data? Because we've known for a long time that so many of our watercourses are in such an adverse condition, and there are practices that are happening that should not be happening, but there's not the enforcement mechanism to do anything about it. Or there is the enforcement mechanism, but there's not the resources for those agencies to then enforce. So we're seeing situations in Norfolk where we've got farmers who are far in breach of the acceptable limits for a nitrate vulnerable zone. But no one is actually doing anything about that. And we're then mitigating and changing that land use, but we're only allowed to count the legal limit. So we're not allowed to count the real limit of nitrates and phosphates as credits, because that's seen as a breach of the regulations, and that shouldn't be happening, even though it is. And so we're not allowed to include that and sell that as credits, even though we're improving the situation. So it's also not, it's about the data, but it's what do we do with the data, and how do we enforce where appropriate?
Thank you. Anna, just whilst we stick on data, an interesting theme. How does it feel? I've used water company terminology. There are acronyms everywhere. Forgive us. But how easy is it, for communities, for real people to get information about water quality and this sort of stuff?
Well, it's not. So, in fact, Robin, we met nearly a year ago, and we were talking at the time about these event duration monitors. So these are the monitors that go on the combined sewage overflow pipes, which will tell people when sewage is being spilled. And a lot of wild swimmers rely on apps such as the Safer Seas apps, which tell us when there's live spills and when we're not able to swim. If we achieve bathing designation, we will have data a week after the testing has happened for 3 months of the year. We swim for 12 months of the year. As I understand it, the water companies were required to have these EDM monitors installed by the end of 2023 on all of their CSO combined sewage overflow pipes, and yet they are not releasing that live data. We've had a really wet February. I think someone said it was the wettest on record. How many swimmers' lives or health has been put at risk because the water companies aren't releasing that data? And I would love to know when that data will be live to us, as promised nearly a year ago.
Yeah, absolutely. So nationally, all storm overflows are now monitored. So 100% are monitored. And we are all, each individual water company are producing maps. And I can show you today the map, kind of where our map is at. Our map is in testing stage, and it will be available hopefully within weeks, Anna, and definitely by bathing season. On the point of the monitoring, the water quality monitoring, and the fact that water quality sampling only takes place during bathing water season, so mid-May to mid-September. Again, we're running a pilot in Southend where we're taking year-round monitoring, so we're sampling once a week to kind of supplement the Environment Agency's data, essentially to use that to make a case to regulators, to DEFRA, to say actually the Environment Agency need more funding to enable this water quality sampling to be done all year round. What's really, really tricky is real-time microbiological monitoring to tell you there's E. coli now, because these tests take a while.
No, of course, but we know in Manningtree from the testing that you guys have done and from the testing that we have been doing with Essex University that we are impacted when there is heavy rain. Our area is not safe to swim in when there is high rainfall. So having data come to us a week late isn't helpful. And when we have bathing designation and we have a sign up that says the water quality is excellent, people will assume that water quality is excellent and good enough to swim in, and it's not.
Yeah. And very, very briefly, we are, they have the surface against it. So we have our beach aware system, so real-time spill data feeds into the beach aware system. That then feeds to surface against sewage. So there are systems already available. This will be a live map that we will have around some overflow. So you can make a decision whether you want to swim or not on the basis.
I'll stop that now. But just my final point is that we have tried to get Anglian Water to work with Surface Against Sewage to get that data up live, and Anglian Water have refused to do it.
We definitely haven't refused, and we've recently met with the new chief exec of Surface Against Sewage to discuss how we can make sure our lines, because we need a single version of the truth. So absolutely, we have not refused. We're reaching out to Surface Against Sewage to make sure you've got one version of the truth. It's really, really important.
It's also worth mentioning that there's nothing to tell you when the motorways are discharging because it's raining, or when a farmer's had a spill or a problem. It's this big picture problem again, isn't it? We're focusing on what the water companies are doing, and there's no recognition of other sources of pollution that may cause harm to swimmers.
No, you're right. And I think my campaign is about ending sewage pollution, and I think there's only so many areas that one person can focus on, especially when you work full-time in a completely different industry. So that is where my focus is, but I do appreciate that there are other areas where the pollution is coming from, and I think through bathing designation and through the testing that Anglian Water is doing in our area, we will discover where those other pollutants are coming from.
We'll move on, but again, hopefully we're showing we're not afraid to discuss anything up here on the panel. It's important that we do, very, very important that we do. One for you, Phil. Who has developed the nutrient credit schemes, and can we have more examples of this type of schemes? Can councils use this to improve the quality of green spaces? Phil?
Was the question who developed it?
Yeah, who developed it? So where did it come from? Who's developed it? And how
in the nicest possible way we have. and we were faced with an issue. We were faced with a major issue of literally overnight, as a guillotine effect, that all housing came to an end. So our response, and it is, I mean, I myself have been in number 10 to describe this response and this model and the trading company that we've set up as Norfolk Environmental Credits to explain how we've set it up, what we've done and what it's doing. And that is a model that's being, that other areas of the country are looking to replicate. Can it be used for other things? Absolutely, it can be used for other things. And one of the reasons we set it up is that for the small builders, this sort of arena is so difficult to get your head around. If you are having to offset nutrients or having to provide green space or having to offset biodiversity net gain, then it's very, very difficult to add that another layer of bureaucracy into the planning system. So this was seen as trying to streamline that, as providing a trading platform for those sorts of environmental ambitions and objectives through the planning process in order to trade that sort of credit. So yes, and that's why we didn't call it Norfolk Nutrient Credits, we called it Norfolk Environmental Credits, because we saw it as that broad spread.
Great, thank you, Phil. Joint next popular question. There's one for me which I'll just deal with and then move on to Pete, if I may. Robin, do you think it's fair that it's up to water companies to decide if they've had a major spill or not and if they inform the Environment Agency? To be absolutely clear, that is not a decision we make. Our aim is to report 100% of issues to the Environment Agency, and then the Environment Agency have a very, very comprehensive and thorough process for assessing spills. So that's all I'll say on that. Pete, farm clusters are a fantastic platform, but is it fair to say they can represent an echo chamber, albeit a positive one? How should the industry reach the unconverted farmers and landowners that aren't engaging with sustainable or regenerative agricultural practices and therefore protecting the water environment?
Can I just ask you another question? Are you pleased you're chairing this group now?
Delighted. Question 3, when I looked on Slido, question 3 is about sewage dumping. So, yeah, I should have been a panellist probably, but there we are. Pete, back to you.
I think you should have seen the audience we had at our last cluster meeting, because it was a very wide spread of the farming community. And certainly we had people from every side of the spectrum at that meeting, as the team from the LNRS probably found out on their way out. There's always a challenge of when you convene something like this being a little bit of an echo chamber, but farmers are concerned with the direction of travel for their industry, or sort of whatever their footprint. And most farmers are aware that this is something that is coming, that environmental impact and possibly payment for environmental goods. And some will be there purely for financial reasons, because they think it will fill the hole where the subsidy used to be. They're not doing it for environmental reasons. But so far, we are getting a broad spread.
Great, thank you very much. Really interesting question from Councillor Guglielmi, Chair of ECC's Planning Committee, around a great opportunity, a bit of an opportunity to promote the Essex Mineral Review concentration, that restoration of extraction sites, a discussion here around restoration sites becoming reservoirs. I remember when I was at Water Resources East, this was of significant interest. You know, if someone's already dug a hole, then why don't we fill it up with water and use it for something sensible? But Pete, any examples of do you see any opportunities of kind of former gravel pits, mineral extractions, and then maybe come to Joe and just see if there's anything you've seen in the Northwest? Is this catching on at all, or are you having to dig your own hole or prepare your own attenuation pond to clean up the runoff?
I think there's probably various examples. I don't know of any in old gravel pits. Over the water in Suffolk, the Ransoms estate, which is now a great big industrial estate, certainly provides a lot of water, I believe, Home Farm Nacton. So there are examples of it. There's work going on down at Felixstowe, which other people are probably better informed about than me. But yeah, farmers are after water, and if it's available, they'll latch into it. But part of that is then supply, and connectivity. How do you get that water from A to B? So it's investing in infrastructure again, I'm afraid.
Joe?
Yeah, I mean, we have sand quarries in Lancashire near where I live, and they, interestingly, they had some sand quarries that had finished quarrying probably about 15 years ago, and there was a hoo-ha about who was going to have them and what for, and they're a nature reserve, but there was definitely argy-bargy about whether they would become a landfill or a canoeing opportunity, or everybody wanted a bit of it, and it ended up being a nature reserve. With regards building ponds for treatment of highway runoff, they wouldn't ever be big enough to be categorised as reservoirs, and frankly, they're grossly polluted, so I wouldn't want to go anywhere near the water in them. Thanks very much.
Fair enough, fair enough. So opportunity to respond to the kind of the minerals strategy here in the county. And don't forget flood risk opportunity as well, the opportunity to mitigate flood risk by, again, if someone's dug a hole and we want to get some water in there, appreciate the infrastructure bit, but yeah, if someone's dug a hole already, that's really handy. There's a question from Charlotte. Who will be using the new Essex Water Strategy website? How's it been publicised? Looks like a great learning resource. A response from Lucy, just talking about kind of promotion through schools, newsletters, and across eco schools, as well as social media channels, and working with partners like the fantastic organisation Waterwise, who've supported it and hope it'll be well promoted. But I guess, what are we all going to do to promote the Essex Water Strategy? As we walk out of this room today, what can we all do to promote it? And those of us that aren't from around here, from Cambridgeshire or whatever, or from abroad in Norfolk, then what are we going to do? You know, what's the great practice we can see here? Essex really are pioneering this, which is really exciting. It's been touched on, but there are lots of great projects and partnership working going on in the region. How do we positively build on this to promote the work we're doing and build better partnerships and maximise opportunities both locally and nationally? I'll ask each of you in turn for your thought on kind of what makes a good partnership and how can we do more of it. So maybe start with you, Phil. The microphone's closest to you.
Often great partnership comes about through necessity. Unfortunately, it'd be great to say it's really easy. To get 4 councils working together, entering as shareholders into a single company with effectively a border or boundary blind approach would not have happened unless we'd suddenly hit this roadblock of nutrient neutrality. However, if we are going to promote good partnership working, we've got to have communication and we've got to keep talking amongst ourselves and understanding the best models. And it was only because those councils were already talking together that actually when we needed to do something together, we could move very quickly. And so it is as simple in my mind as, what is that shared objective? Is it necessary? Because if it is, then it's going to enhance partnership working, and just keep talking.
Thanks. I sit on the River Douglas Catchment Partnership, which is one of the catchment partnership groups in the Northwest, and it's a fantastic partnership. And it's a fantastic partnership because it focuses on doing stuff. We've become guilty in this country of paralysing ourselves with paperwork and projects and spreadsheets and bureaucracy, and we have to make sure that we balance that with actually doing stuff. And the Douglas Catchment Partnership, just fantastic. It's not me, it's a gang of people who work for groundwork up there, and they go into classrooms and they have trout eggs in little tanks, and the kids watch the little trout eggs grow into little trout, and then they put them in the river. They do river fly surveys, they take barriers to fish out of rivers. We've got to make sure that we focus on delivering action rather than just continuing to do strategies and plans and spreadsheets.
Anna, your view on partnership working?
I would say transparency. Through transparency, you build trust, and through trust, people want to know that the planet and people are going to be put before company profits.
I'll probably go for the fact that some of the most productive partnerships are often where you see people working together that you wouldn't normally expect to see working together, like some of the people on the panel with me. And also it's recognising the value in the product or the resource that you're sharing the partnership with. And with water, that's really important. We do keep coming back to value, and the value of water to a farmer, the value of the water in that hole to the local community that want the water level to stay high, or the value to the water company that might like to see some of that water flowing down the stream to improve their flow and dilute some of the problems in that catchment.
Wonderful, thank you. Just got a couple of minutes left, so just the last question or so. Somebody anonymously has said, Joe, just to say you were brilliant, and as a member of the general population, I'm seeing an increasing amount of conversation online about road runoff, so you're getting through. So great job. And there's another question around the potential for citizen scientists to help with some of this, but again, it comes a bit back to the data. But Joe, did you want to say any more about citizen science? And Anna, kind of some of the role you're doing, some of the monitoring you're doing. I know that there's a bit of a barrier we need to get through in terms of, legitimising citizen science to make sure, in the eyes of kind of policymakers, to make sure that it stands up alongside a sample taken in a sterile bottle, sample through an accredited bottle. What can we do? What more can we do to collectively present evidence and data to policymakers?
I think the platforms you've mentioned before, like Casco and the other one that's in development, are going to be the best way to deliver that data. We've just got to get better at acknowledging that people like the Rivers Trust are collecting really good data. And there's no reason, people say, I took some samples myself recently, we're going to publish them, and somebody said, but who took the samples? Were they trained? Well, actually, yes, I was, but really, how hard can it be to put a can over the edge of a bridge and on the end of a piece of string and take a sample? So we need to be a little bit more circumspect about where we get our samples and just accept the data and be grateful for it.
I don't know if I have too much to add, only that with the University of Essex, what we're finding is funding is a massive issue. So we can get the volunteers to go out and do the sampling, but they only have funding for a year. And then where do we send our samples to be tested?
Wonderful. And just a question from me, I'll put the iPad down, just a question in the last couple of minutes. Just if you could see one positive outcome from the Essex Water Strategy and from today's session, what would it be? Just one outcome. I'll start with Pete, if I may.
I thought I got a bit more time then.
Sorry.
I'm sorry to bang on about it, typical farmer talking about money. But yeah, it's recognising the value to each participant in the water chain, if you like, from upstream all the way down to the coastal shallows. And if we can recognise that and what that is, then there's opportunity to start putting some of these things into practice. Thank you.
I think my hope for today is that everyone will make their way to a beautiful river or coastal location today and take a moment to breathe and just see the natural beauty and feel connected to it.
I'm particularly grateful to Lucy for keeping the focus on wildlife. We've talked a lot about water today and people, and we need to remember that water is also essential for wildlife. And I was reading a Guardian article that came out yesterday that said we are going to see 40 degrees C in the future often, and possibly up to 46 degrees C. That's, we'll worry about that, but what about the creatures that live near your home, the hedgehogs and the voles and the shrews and the birds? Where are they going to get water from? And luckily, because Lucy's had a sharp focus on that in the plan will help with that, I think.
I think there's always a danger that you come to this sort of thing and think it's happening all over the country. It's not, and yeah, this is some really impressive stuff that's happening here, and a really important focus. And it will continue to grow in its importance. I would anticipate that you'll be ahead of the curve, and that should be celebrated but built upon.
And I'll just echo that, absolutely. To say, obviously, as Anglian Water, we work from Lincolnshire down, we work across many counties kind of thing, and there's a lot of work going on in Norfolk around kind of governance and finance, but in terms of you're the first county that I've seen to publish a water strategy, an integrated water management water strategy. So kind of hats off to you. And again, as Phil says, don't assume this is happening everywhere. There's magic in this room. There's magic in the plan. There's some stuff. There are some tricky conversations to continue to have, but let's keep having them. If we don't, we ain't going to move forward at all. So congratulations to everyone at Essex County Council, everyone involved in the water strategy. And thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to chair today's panel. Thank you to 4 amazing panelists. Thank you very much.
That was a very good panel session. So thank you very much to all the panelists and Paul for that. That was, I think, stimulating to get that range of questions. And I think having those questions come in and getting answered by people from different opinions, from different ways of life is so interesting. And it shows that the way that the water touches us all in every way. So we're actually coming towards the end of our summit this morning, or is now afternoon. So I'm going to ask Paul to help wrap up the proceedings, really, with some of his own closing remarks. And I noticed that he's been scribbling feverishly away, taking up all of the good points. So I'm sure it'll be a really good wrap-up. So I'm going to just let Paul have the final say on this. Paul.
Thank you. And it hasn't been a really good day, or morning, and a bit of the afternoon. But it's been really worthwhile and informative. And as Robin was just saying, I think this is a first for Essex, being able to come out with a county-led water strategy. So all power to you. And it's been very thought-provoking. There's been great presentations, great questions and answers. I do reflect, along with Joe, on citizen science contributions, where people are a bit prissy, aren't they, about do they really know how to do this? And some of my ex-colleagues wondering whether or not I'm competent to take water samples. I am, just like Joe is. But there is also a really good lead for citizen science within the Anglian region of the Environment Agency, so do make contact with him. And if you come to me afterwards, I'll tell you who it is. The other thing that I just remembered, because sometimes we forget, don't we, the work that's gone before, and we think we have to recreate stuff. There was a really good bit of science done which has been hugely informative on the DNA typing of E. coli. And it's then possible to tell whether or not the E. coli comes from people, or it comes from birds, donkeys on Blackpool Beach, dogs, or livestock. And that's really important as well. That technology is there, tested, works, but I would guarantee that a number of people don't know that it exists. Somehow we need to make sure that we remember the previous lessons. So we've heard Essex Water. Essex is in a water-stressed area. We all agree that. The environment is not in the state it should be, and it needs help, and it needs restoration and protection and improvement. And there are some things that have to be done now to just deal with current pressures. Forget what's going to happen. Current pressures need to be addressed if the environment is going to be in a healthy state. And then there are those additional pressures that we've heard about housing, commercial, economic growth, and from climate change. Those are additional to the existing pressures. So should we be despondent? I don't think we should, because I think it is possible to be realistic about what we face and then act on it and do something about it. Personally, I'm optimistic, always have been. And that if we do work together in partnership, and that was key in that last session, if we work in partnership, we will make a difference. And by pooling resources, we will be more effective and we will be more efficient. And as Robin was saying, it's not about pointing fingers. We all have a role to play. Us as individuals, businesses, land managers, the public sector, we all have roles to play in doing something practical, not just facilitating others to do something, but we doing something ourselves in this. The water companies clearly have a major role in leakage reduction, helping reduce use through facilitating that, in smart metering, and we saw what a difference that can make, and also in providing the new strategic options. Because there's two aspects to this, isn't there? Most probably three, and I most probably could add to those. But there's demand management that we need to address. There's new supply that we need to address. And then there's the whole nature-based approach that we need to be encouraging and all of it encompassing. And then we also need to make sure that we're using the right water for the right purpose. I still do find it strange that we use drinking quality water to flush away human waste. That just seems the wrong thing to be doing. So how do we promote greater rainwater harvesting, greywater recycling, water recycling centre / sewage treatment works, effluent reuse? How do we change that practice? It's going to require policy changes. It'll most probably require changes in the building regulations, but it's all possible. So lots to think about, but most probably even more to do. And we need to start doing that as of now. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Paul. That was a great summary from you. Enjoyed that immensely. And I hope you've all had an interesting and useful morning and almost afternoon, and are going to go away inspired. I think I certainly will, but more than inspired, I think we're all going to go away with a bit more knowledge. And also, we're going to start thinking and talking, and actually we're going to notice more, I think, on the value of water. And what it means to us, what it means to our biodiversity, what it means to our climate. So I think there's a lot that's been said this morning that we need to think about and digest. So again, I just want to thank all of our panelists, I want to thank all of our speakers, and I want to thank them for taking the time and effort to make the launch of the Essex Water Strategy what it has been today. And it's good that so many of you have been here taking that interest as well. So thank you very much for all your time. But just before you go, a couple of things. As you know, we've been using Slido. Well, we're going to launch a survey now. So if you can, and you have got the time, we'd love to get you just to fill it in before you go, because if you do it now, you're going to be reacting in a way that you feel about this morning. If you leave it for a day or two, you'll start thinking about it. We'd just like to know what you actually think now. So please do it if you've got the time, and we hope that you do have. And I believe the link is going to be on the screen behind me very shortly. One other interesting piece of information that you may want to think about. Our next climate conference is going to take place on Wednesday, October the 16th. Don't worry, we've got your email addresses. We will send you invitations. So, again, that's something else that we're going to look forward to. Keep an eye out for that. Of course, it's going to be another climate day for Essex County Council, and I hope that you feel like I personally do, that we are certainly on the cutting edge of an awful lot for Essex. And unusually, we are going to finish with a video. So I'm going to stop talking in a minute, and we're going to have a video that is effectively going to launch our Essex Water Strategy. And I'm sure that you will enjoy it, and it's just going to be sort of, a reflective of what we've been talking about all morning. And my kind of final thought is, we've actually been talking about the challenges of water going ahead. We know about the past, as Paul referred to. We know about the heritage of our water. We know how important it is socially, mentally, health. We know about the importance of operating with partnerships and going forward. But it's the challenges ahead that are going to be interesting. So let us rise to that challenge. So let us seize the opportunities, and let us ensure that the water that sustains us today will continue to flow for generations to come. Thank you. We'll have the video now.
Well, the water situation in Essex is really interesting because Essex is actually a seriously water-stressed county. By the time we get to about 2030 or so, we are going to be using an incredible amount of water, and we're going to have up to 150 million litres of that shortage.
The Essex Water Strategy. This is a brand new strategy. It's the first time we've ever produced a water strategy at Essex County Council. We suffer from extreme drought in the summer, and then we have flooding issues in the winter. Our landscape does not deal well with water. We have real water quality issues as well. Only 5% of our water courses are classed as good. So we have real pollution problems in our rivers. The water strategy brings together a huge range of information from government, from the water companies, to really help us understand the scale of the challenge and to set out the things that government and water companies are already doing, but also to make recommendations for other things that we need to take forward to really tackle both a better water supply, but also higher quality water right across the county.
There's three main solutions. The first one is about reducing demand. The second one is like comprehensive landscape change. We need to think about kind of reworking the landscape so that water is absorbed in the landscape. So planting trees, having meadows, marshes, wildlife areas, all of that absorbs water and stops it flowing into the rivers so quickly. And the final one is alternative water supplies. So we've got to think about where we're getting our water from. There's so much water comes in through the sky, we've got to capture it.
Hi, my name is Daniel Johns. I'm Managing Director of Water Resources East, and we're delighted to have partnered with Essex County Council in producing the Essex Water Strategy. As Water Resources East, we're really looking forward to working with the county to implement policies that save water and help protect the environment.